I am going to turn it over to Claudia and Keith. Our first item is our capital improvement plan financial overviews. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay.
There you go.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We will give a brief overview to the board and community on our capital financing plan. Many of these slides are quite familiar, but we want to, as we work towards final budget adoption, go over some of the more relevant ones or some of highest priority. The important thing to remember about capital improvement plans, they're a living document and captures a snapshot of time. And we will continue to refine what's in that document for months, years to come, decades to come. And so I'll turn it over to Keith, and we'll walk through it pretty quickly.
Thank you, Claudia. Just a few cleanup items. There were a flurry of emails sent out from our office earlier today. Commissioner Jacobs had some secondary questions, and we provided some information related to those, and then we provided through email a copy of this presentation and a copy of some answers that DPS had to some questions you all had and some questions the Budget Office had. Both of those documents are in Legistar under the DPS items, so you can find them there or in the emails. Commissioner Jacobs just said a whole bunch of questions to us, and we'll begin working on those. After this capital financing plan presentation update, then DPS and DTCC are here and ready to speak up and to you all about anything you want to talk about related to their budget request versus the recommended budget. As Claudia noted, we're going to talk briefly, hopefully briefly, about the capital financing plan, the financing side of the CIP. This is not going to be an overview of all the projects in the CIP. We've had those presentations, and we may have another one before we approve it. This is how we're paying for it. So it's going to start off with a 10-year sort of look, and then it's going to finish up with what we're having to pay next year, which is a very real part of the approved budget, or you all approving the budget. So we're going to start with an overview of the projects, real quick, just showing you how much they cost. Then I'm going to talk about how we pay for it over 10 years, and then what we're doing next year. That'll be how this all gets funnels down, hopefully.
The questions that were sent in, you won't be addressing those.
No, ma'am. The questions sent in by whom? Commissioner Jacobs? No, ma'am. I would love to be able to say that we could answer them within 30 minutes. They'll take a little longer than that. Thank you. We will get answers to everyone as soon as we get them answers compiled.
Yeah, it was just that I'm having technology problems, so I don't have access to questions.
I would, Commissioner Jacobs, you asked in some of those questions about having people come to meet. I don't know if you're asking us or asking other board members that they want. I would ask that you all meet as a group or talk as a group about whom else you want to add into the budget work sessions to have come up and talk and help guide us. Thank you.
And,
all right.
Commissioner Howerton, we will print those out for you so that you'll have the questions before you leave. So we'll get those to you soon.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'll have some technology.
They are in your email. Commissioner Jacobs sent it to all commissioners, her questions, as well as members of management. CIP Guiding Principles. As always, projects try to align with BOCC goals. They tend to be consistent and hopefully consistent with the Facility Master Plan recommendations. That Facility Master Plan gets updated every couple of years as well. We always try to develop a capital financing plan in relation to the CIP that sets debt levels that allow us to maintain a AAA bond rating. It's a foundational issue for us. And we're always try to give priorities to projects not completed in previous CIPs. Those are just some of the guiding principles. The CIP calendar, what's left, is sometime either this month or next month. We're hopeful to come back to you after we've had multiple conversations about the CIP to get your approval of the 10-year 22-31 capital improvement plan. I'm not going to sit on this long. The total CIP is around $1.8 billion. That's with a little bit of prior year money, but you can see some serious spending starting in 21-22, the year we're in right now, through 20-30-31. Again, we'll have another presentation where we'll talk about the projects that add up to this number. That's not what this presentation is about. But somehow we got to pay for $1.8 billion worth of projects. That's what we're going to talk about. What does that mean? That means a mountain of debt more than we have been used to in the past. If you look at the yellow line there, that was the estimated annual debt service payments over time from the 2029 approved CIP. The blue mountain is the estimated debt that we're going to probably pay on what is you're going to hopefully approve as the 2231 CIP. We've taken on a significant number of new projects or increased cost of existing projects, largely driven, no fault intended, largely driven by DPS needs. You have all heard DPS needs for capital improvements, and we've taken on a significant number of those projects. Projects across the board that existed in the previous CIP to this CIP have increased in cost significantly due to inflation, the cost and lack of resources, the cost of those resources. So, that being said, we're going to talk about how much cost we have to pay in estimated debt service, that blue mountain instead of the yellow one, and how we plan to pay for it and what resources we have to pay for it. The type of debt we take on are usually related to GO bonds, which are approved by voters in the county. We don't do the GO bond referendums very often, but when we do, we have to go to voters and get approval. LOBS funding is long-term debt financing that we go out and issue debt, but we don't have to go to voters for that. The difference between LOBS and GO bonds is largely the interest rate you pay. Because you get voter approval for GO bonds and some of the legality around that, you generally get a lower interest rate for GO bonds that you'll pay over 20 years compared to LOBS. Bank financings are 10 years or shorter, usually in the 4 to 5 year range, and those are for projects that only have a lifespan of 4 to 5 years. You don't pay 20 years on a car or a computer or things of that nature. You pay 20 years on houses or buildings, and that's where GO bonds and LOBS, and then we use bank financing for other short-term, shorter lifespan type capital projects. The timing of the CIP is largely weighted to the first 5 years. Just a reminder, the proposed 22 general obligation bond referendum that has been discussed and will continue to be discussed is around $550 million. Most of that, 400 plus million going to DPS, 100 plus million going to a little over 100 million to DTCC projects, and I think somewhere in the $13 to $14 million range going for North Carolina Museum of Life and Science. In fact, those are pretty much the only three education-related areas that are on the GO bond referendum. Claudia?
Yes, at your work session in June, we will bring some of the formal documents that sort of kicks off the process for the referendum. As you know, we'll go through a series of hearings, public conversations, et cetera, and we'll give other updates as well. That was a question. So we're working with bond counsel right now, so that will be on your work session in a couple of weeks.
But the GO bonds are not the only thing we're issuing over this 10 years. We're also issuing LOBS dollars for county projects to help support GO bond-related projects for DPS and some other things. So this is not the only thing creating that blue mountain of debt, but it is a chunk of it. All right, this is where we get into the number side, and I hopefully have created some red boxes here that will help you follow along. This is the capital financing plan. Over 10 years, it's sort of shrunk down. The top table shows you the type of debt we're paying for. There's existing debt. It's called known debt up there. And then there's new debt. That's debt I expect us to take on in time as DPS and county projects start spending money and we go issue debt, then we have to start paying for it. What I'd like for you to notice is what we look like we're going to pay in 2024. It looks like 23-24, not this year coming up, but the next year. It's about $91 million in debt. But look at the year after that. Once we start taking on potentially approved GO bond debt and DPS and DTCC and the museum and other county capital projects start spending money, look at how significant the increase is in the annual debt service payment. That's assuming everyone does things in the time frame that we are planning on. But that's a $40 million increase in debt annually, and it stays there for a while. If you look at if you go from, let me back up here. If you go from 130, it goes to 136, then it jumps to 152 million. Does anyone care to take a guess why it jumps to 152 million? That was a pop quiz. I didn't really expect y'all to answer that. We are also planning for an additional GEO-bond referendum out in 2026. So this would be the next year, assuming spending starts on that GEO-bond referendum and other projects, to then jump to 150 million. So within the span, potentially, of 3, 4, 5 years, we're going from $90 million of debt and related expenditures to $150 million a year. So we got to pay for that. That's the expense side of the equation. And then if you look at that sort of middle box that says CFP revenue types, these are the revenue sources you all have set by policy, sales tax, occupancy tax, and then property tax. That's the revenue we have to find to pay for it. We have fund balance, we have non-property tax related revenue, we have occupancy tax, property tax revenue, and sales tax revenue. What are the sales tax revenues that we have that support our capital financing plan? By board policy, and you can find this in your document under the Other General Funds section, you allocate Article 40 and 42 sales tax and a chunk of the Article 46 sales tax that was voted on by voters 5 plus 10 years ago. And then there's occupancy tax. Almost all of our occupancy tax goes to support capital financing. So those are revenue sources. What I want you to also see is how much we're planning to spend in fund balance that we have in 24-25. It jumps from 8 million, 2 million, 7 million to 22 million, then fluctuates around. Why I point this out to you all is this is the number Claudia talks about all the time, where we have built up fund balance in certain funds related to capital financing, so we can limit the amount of tax rate increase needed in any given year. We try to spread our savings out over future years to limit the amount of tax rate increase needed, or when we have to have one, we minimize it. Does that make sense? So in that 1 year, all things being, assuming things play out the way we think they are, we could appropriate $22 million of fund balance to help us not go in 24-25 up in a property tax rate increase. Yes, ma'am.
That's really, really interesting. Is that debt service fund balance?
It is a mixture. We have 3 different funds that sort of support that support capital financing. We have a capital financing plan fund. It's an interim fund, and I'll explain that a little later. It is the debt service fund, and we have a swap fund. You hear Susan talk every year about this swap fund, and it has earned, again, everyone should thank George Quick, again, even though he's long retired. Hopefully he's enjoying it. He created this swap fund that has earned the county millions of dollars, and those dollars are sitting in a fund. We don't normally spend them, but they sit there waiting for us to apply those dollars when needed. So some of that $22 million and some of the $15 million the next year and some of the $77 million you're looking at across the 10 years is that swap fund, is debt service fund balance, and is capital financing plan fund balance. And if you look at, I think that diagram I gave you in your summary, it shows those funds.
Okay. And if we appropriated more fund balance in any of those years, might that reduce the need for a property tax rate increase in any of the years where we're seeing one?
It's a zero-sum game. Yes, ma'am. You could decrease it 1 year. You're just going to have to make it up in a different year the way this plan is set up. Yes, ma'am. We don't want to go to zero in this fund balance because we need it. You hit the fund balance. You've hit various portions of these fund balance multiple times in the last 2 years. When you have a project that Perry Manns, whom I've come to be frustrated with when he shows up because he's always asking for more dollars, not his fault, of course, for the increased cost of existing projects. And where do we find money when a project goes up $2 million, $4 million? A perfect example is the support of the 300 parking deck affordable housing went up $4 million. That money just doesn't magically appear. We pull it out of fund balance. And I keep a close eye on those 3 funds, and I go, do I have $3 million? Yes, but it gives me less room to add more to your exact question out in a future year.
Keith, is it the case, when that happens, when we take money out of debt service fund balance or these ongoing increases that are happening for all the reasons that we know, inflation and supply chain issues, et cetera, can we assume that you have looked at this capital financing plan long term and are telling us, you know, when the staff brings it forward, telling us that, you know, it's okay to appropriate these funds. It's not going to mess up our capital financing.
We're not doing material appropriations, okay? It's the trickiness of all of it is how the revenues come together and how the capital finance plan is basically financed. If there are fluctuations in sales taxes, that means they are lower. I mean, there's more pressure on property taxes or those fund reserves to cover that gap. The way that we manage, and you know, Susan talked about our fund balance a couple of days ago, the way we manage our fund balance for debt service is favorable towards rating agencies because it does have that contingency for long-term unexpected issues. Of course, the dollars to support debt service, but it is healthy to give us enough time to shift if we need to plan differently, because we look at this annually as we plan the budget. And Keith, you can weigh in further.
That's really helpful. That's great.
It's a really, all of that is monopoly money out in future years. It's all based on assumptions. There's no guarantee. If we spend money slower, if projects ending up costing more than we are estimating them to cost 4 years from now, which is very possible, that could change the equation. If our revenue sources other than fund balance come in slower, as Claudia noted, sales tax is entirely economically driven. Occupancy tax may even be even more sensitive to the economy and COVID and things. So inflation is here, and it's hot and heavy, and $4.50 a gallon for gas. I don't know what that's going to do for sales tax. Remember, Article 40, Article 42, and portion of Article 46 sales tax and occupancy tax. You can see the amounts in this plan allotted to the CIP. If those numbers are lower, where do I get the revenue if they're coming lower than I estimate in 2025 or 26 or 27? There's only two choices: our savings account, which is fund balance, or increasing the property tax rate. So when I say it's a 2.5-cent property tax rate estimated for 23-24, that's assuming I bring in the amount of revenue I'm projecting from sales tax. And it happens every year, and that's just the revenue side. And back to the expenditure side, is DPS going to spend as quickly as they hope to? Probably. We hope. Is DTCC, are we going to? Or is Perry going to continue to come back and go, supply distribution means project costs are increasing at 20%, and all of those things add up together to balance the two, and then we see where fund balance is, which is why we, the county management, is hesitant to say, let's spend fund balance today, because I have uses for it out in the future.
One more question. In the past, GEO-bonds that we've had, have we ended up having to make these property tax increases in order to finance the debt?
We did for the 2016 GEO bond. It was a 1.75-cent tax rate increase right off the bat. Claudia?
Yes, so the bond rating agencies prefer, it's almost mandated, that you raise the taxes when you approve the referendum. So that ensures that a future board is not having to raise taxes for an obligation that a different board may have done. But it guarantees that those dollars are there to help liquidate that debt. That sort of requirement, best practice, happened primarily after the 2008-2009 fiscal decline across the nation. And so this then became the preferred approach. So as Keith mentioned, we, at first start, we may need 2.5 cents in 2016 to support the debt. As we got better information, saw patterns, it became a lower number. And so that just sort of speaks to our consistency in looking at the numbers, and it's one of those places you try to be as accurate as possible, but there are so many variables, but we look at it often with the intent of trying to limit the tax pressures on our residents and the businesses.
So to Claudia's point, if you look at this capital financing plan, that little single line table where it says additional capacity, if you look in 24, you see 21.6 million. That's because we're going to go to the voters, as Claudia said, and say we need a 2.5-cent tax rate increase, and we're going to ask the board to increase it 2.5 cents. But we're really not spending that money immediately in 23, 24. So we're going to bank 21.6 million. It's going to go to fund balance, but we'll turn around and use that fund balance the next year. And the next year, 25, 26. It's part of keeping the AAA bond rating. Those agencies like to see that you all are willing, once the voters approve said bond referendum at 2.5 cents, that you'll go ahead and raise it 2.5 cents, or whatever the number ends up being as we get a little bit closer. Commissioner Jacobs.
I was just going to mention, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to mention, Keith, there's a slide in here that lists the caveat. I don't know where it is in here. Maybe it's later on the side, on the right side. You list, well, but we still don't know, and it's dependent on all these variables, which I thought was really great. I don't know if
I've added it to this presentation or not. We'll see.
you know which one I'm talking
No,
about.
ma'am.
We'll see.
I can't remember. There are immense number of caveats here that I'm happy to list.
Yeah, it's on the right side, and you listed all the different things that could impact this projection. So it's there. I thought it was really good.
Before you leave this, I just have one quick question. In that same row of fund balance appropriated, and you get to 2031 as a zero there. So what does that mean? What's the consequences of that being zero?
That's the consequence of being 10 years out, and it's almost make-believe at that point. You're going to review the CIP every 2 years. You're going to have potentially a GO bond referendum in 26, but every 2 years you're going to have county departments and DPS and other entities say, we've got other things to do, and you'll redo the CIP. The closer we get in reality to 2030, 31, the more those numbers will be real. It's just the math from that far out. Remember, our CIP is a little front-heavy. Everybody focuses on the first 5 years. That's more real than the second 5 years. That's why it's zero out there.
And I'll give a quick example. In 2016, when we went to the
I'm glad.
voters and asked them to raise taxes, a penny was estimated at $3.5 million, okay? And so now we're estimating it at almost $5 million. So from a projections perspective, we try to be realistic, and conservative, but aggressive a little, but the opportunities for us to do that reconciliation yearly helps us to catch up on that growth. So I just wanted to point that out.
I'm going to go through these red boxes real quick and finish up. Just wanted you to know on property tax revenue, before we're currently at 8.61 cents. We're recommending staying at 8.61 cents. We're also recommending right now a 2.5-cent tax rate increase in 23, 24 related to a potential approval of a GO bond referendum. And you can see I'm building in that increase 2.5 cents because we jumped from an estimated $41 million collected to $54 million. And then if we have, you can see in 2025-26, in theory, we have a GO bond referendum sometime in that time frame as well, and another 3-cent tax rate increase. So you see property tax increasing. Again, they're not make-believe numbers. It's a plan assuming we follow this schedule of events. Down here in the bottom, I just wanted to show you, these are the 3 fund balance areas that we have. So roughly we have $68 million between these 3. And as I spend fund balance in 23, 24, 25, 26, and on out, you can see the total amount of fund balance we have available burning down from 60 to 30-something million. Does that make sense? And that, again, remember, you're going to have additional CIPs where you add more projects on. So I may even burn some of this $30 million that looks like we have left out in 2031, or the economy could be a little bit worse, and I have that in my back pocket to pay for some things, or the cost of projects. Again, caveats, lots of caveats to all of this. This is the same sort of information, just shown visually. I won't bore you with it. It just shows you. What I want you to really see is how the new debt is starting to take over as we really start spending on future projects, and then the revenue sources we're using to pay for it. I do have a little red box over here that I want to point out. Right now in FY 22-23, we're looking at property tax supporting approximately 44% of the entire debt service, and sales tax supporting 48%. Look down in 2028, 29, 30, we become very dependent on property tax. In other words, the cost, we're spending more than we're growing in sales tax, and we're having to depend on a property tax rate increases to find the revenue to do the things that you all want to have done and that are being requested to have done. It's tough. That's the only option we have, is to increase property taxes to take care of the needs that are being requested from you all. Department requested annual estimated debt service. We always do several years of short-term financing before we issue the debt. So even though the board will approve, let's assume the citizens approve a GO bond referendum and DPS starts spending money, we'll let them spend money for 2 years. We'll use a local bank, get a short-term loan, kind of like, I forget what we call them at house. Doesn't matter. Short-term loan. And then when the schools have spent, magically, DTCC and us, $60 to $80 million, we'll go issue $80 million of long-term debt, pay off the short-term loan, and then pay 20 years on $80 million. That's really all that first statement is. It's how we, go ahead, Claudia.
And that this is another area that Durham County was one of the first jurisdictions in the state to do this. This is more an approach that the private sector does. Our former CFO, George Quick, we can thank him for this as well, has saved the county millions in interest. So you're only paying for that longer-term debt when you actually approve the project to move forward.
When something's been built or in the process of being built. Because oftentimes projects end up taking a little longer than we have planned in the CIP, and you're not stuck paying millions of dollars a year on the debt on that. And it's more just-in-time financing. The property tax rate increase, this is where Commissioner Jacobs said she saw the caveats. Just to point out, the upcoming GO bond referendum is estimated to need a 2.5-cent tax rate increase. Estimated's the key word. We'll look a little bit next year, maybe lower. Hopefully it is a lower tax rate needed. I'm concerned with inflation and how much sales tax we're going to start collecting, and we'll just have to see, but it's right at 2.5 cents. Then by the time we get to another GO bond referendum that's built into this 10-year CIP out in 2026, we'll need a 3.1 cent tax rate increase, potentially. That's looking at it right now. 3 years from now, that number may be lower. It's not set in stone. Caveats, tax rate increases are dependent on project spending pace on the expenditure side. Interest rates, how much we pay, how much it costs us to take out a loan and pay that loan. Other dedicated revenue sources, which are economically related, sales tax and occupancy tax. How much revenue are we bringing in from that? That number could fluctuate from my estimates. It's a caveat. Change in project cost. Again, I'll point out Perry Mans is the person who brings that to us every time. That's just the state of where our economy is. In a hot economy, the cost of projects are changing constantly. That's why Claudia referenced this as a living, breathing document. Part of that is the change in project cost. Additional projects.
One point too, real quick. In 2008, 2009, we benefited because of with lower project cost, and we're able to build the judicial building and a couple of other projects.
Human Services Complex and that 12-story judicial building were built relatively cheaply because we spent money in a slow economic time.
Exactly. So we benefit with the economic cycles.
So other caveats, additional projects are added to the CIP, potential growth in tax valuation. That's a great thing. The stronger the tax valuation growth is, the more property tax revenue you bring in without a property tax rate increase. And then there's always unplanned use of dedicated fund balance. That's how we pay for project increases or a surprise thing you all get, and you're like, oh, how can we use it? Well, I can find some money but it's taking it out of one of these three savings accounts that I have dedicated for capital financing fund. Any questions?
I just want to thank you guys. You know, this is such a beautiful model in a way, and it's dependent, as this slide shows, as Wendy was pointing out earlier, on so many variables that we do not know what's going to happen with them. There's so many permutations and combinations of how these things could go. It's a lovely model. Thank you.
And it's been in existence since the late 80s. Our former commissioner and former mayor Bill Bell and former commissioner Reckow were some of the architects of this model. So we're fortunate in Durham to have boards that have the forethought to be tactical in how you invest in capital infrastructure. But we love it.
It is just a model, though, so thank you for understanding the concept. It is not biblical. It is not the truth. It is just a model. Having said that, Claudia and our office and finance tend to be conservative. We like to overestimate the cost of a project and underestimate our revenue growth, and then every year we've got a little bit extra, and we have breathing room to take on new things. So that's built into the model. What would a tax rate increase mean for an individual house? Commissioner Burns, we have not yet got that fluid version of a tax rate increase, but we will get there to you. This just shows you what an estimated 2.5-cent tax rate increase alone, a one-time 2.5-cent, would cost for various houses in the monthly average for that 2.5 cents. I won't dwell on it. You've seen it before. It's out there. This, I've now taken you from a wide look at the capital financing, how we pay for it over 10 years, and we're going to show you now what we've got to pay for in 22-23. That's part of what you'll approve as the 22-23 budget. So we have an estimated debt we've got to pay of around $76 million. How do we pay for that debt? You all have board policy where we take Article 40 and 42 sales tax and Article 40, a portion of Article 46 sales tax and occupancy tax. That equals $49.2 million. Plus the swap fund is making it $1.5 million. We take that $49.2 million and we move it to the capital financing plan. And in that capital financing plan, we add some more ingredients, some more dollars. We add 8.61 cents worth of property tax at another $41.3 million. We have a podunk amount of interest earnings, and we have a little bit of fund balance we're appropriating to give me a total of $92 million to do something with. We're going to take $16.9 million of that $92 million and do some pay-goes, straight cash to some projects, including Board of Elections, but whatever we choose related to the Board of Elections, new building, or how we do that. A lot of ongoing projects like replacing HVAC systems on county buildings, roof replacements that run through general services, upkeeping parking lots. We usually give them a dollop of cash, pay-go money that's part of this $16 million to those projects so they can keep all those things in tip-top condition. Stadium upgrades, detention center windows, some IT projects, some EMS building planning or starting on some EMS buildings. 500 East Main is going to start needing some money for the affordable portion, housing portion of 500 at 4.1. It's $16 million. It's a large amount this year. That number fluctuates. This is just cash. So I got $16.9 million of the $92 million going to pay-go cash projects. I've got $500,000 going to our public arts fund, and that number will increase consistently as we start piling up a little some money in the public arts fund per board policy for public art at some of these buildings coming up. Then I've got $74.5 million of that accrued revenue in the capital financing plan fund being transferred to the debt service fund. And you can see those little arrows on this page right here that's part of your summary document. That's the movement of money, the blue arrow from some of these funds to the other, where I've got to pay $76 million in debt service. 74.5 is coming from the capital financing plan fund. There's some miscellaneous income related to parking and various sundry things. Fund balance appropriated to 11. So that's how I pay $76 million in 22-23. Yes, ma'am, Commissioner Jacobs.
Well, another beautiful model here, Keith. Where on here, though, do I see reflected the $6 million worth of yearly capital funding that we give to the schools, plus the other debt financing for the schools. Should that be reflected on here?
I think I have one more. The debt-related financing of that 76 million is estimated to be 34 million is related to Durham Public Schools, 2.2, and that's where you'll see it on the DPS page.
Okay.
It's not, it's being DPS-related debt services paid out of the debt service fund. So it's $76 million. And then on the DPS page in the general fund, just as an addendum piece of information, I point out that of the $76 million I'm paying over here, this is the DPS-related amount. To the point about the $6 million in annual capital funding, that's a general fund appropriation. It's part of the total $176 million being requested that goes directly to
Got it.
DPS. That is not under our purview to
Got it.
pay. That's what they use to do
Right.
a whole host of things I'm sure they can tell you about. Their own HVAC systems, but that's part of their annual funding, that $6 million.
Okay. And then the Public Art Fund, I'm curious about this because I think this is something new, I don't remember this being pulled out last year. And just wondering how we're doing that because it's supposed to be 1% of the capital costs. So how are you projecting the amount?
Well, I'm not yet because I think we still need to pin down, are we talking about 1% of the cost of a project before the project's done, 1% after the project's done, upfront money? I mean, we can come back in the middle of this year and add more money to it. It's a significant amount if you do 1% of what? The total 10-year CIP? I need some clarification on that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So this is our attempt to start the conversation as we
Got it.
refine
Okay.
what the nuances of the board's intent was with that public art fund. This is a practice other jurisdictions do as well, because a lot of times entities will pay attention to those pressing capital needs, but the aesthetics as well around it is important as jurisdictions blend into the community and aesthetically.
I want to do a quick follow-up. One, as always, thank y'all. I geek out at the numbers like Heidi does. And thank you for pointing out that the 34 and the 74 and the 6 is in the, because I think it's important that and I'm happy she asked it. I do think it's important that people see that. I want to follow back up because I guess I'm confused too, and I know Manager Hager, you said we started the conversation, but I had the same question that Commissioner Jacobs had. Don't we do a 1% set aside out of the budget for a public art fund? Dave, I see you coming because I saw you walk up. I'm trying to pull you in, my friend. Maybe, and I think because I had that question. And so, is this $500,000 on top of that 1%, or do we have are we confused about the 1%?
No, the 1% is definitely what board policy said. It's just
okay.
defining what the 1% actually means.
Okay.
I haven't quite pinned that down, so I put a $500,000 amount.
There we
and
go.
then we will refine it, and it may have to come back and adjust the capital financing. It's a living, breathing, and it may end up being $1 million a year. I'm not sure. We just have to clarify.
And I've been handling those conversations with our engineering partners for our office, is why I stepped up and kept Keith a little bit off the record on those. But the $500,000 is a starter amount because we're working with Linda Salguero.
Okay.
Her name. Who's a great asset over there to refine. We don't want to put money in the public art fund in advance if we don't need it that year.
That's correct.
Okay. There
Is
we go.
why we're only doing
where I'm
500.
going,
We have a certain amount on a spreadsheet that shows what the 1% is to date, but we're waiting to move it until we have more certainty beyond what's needed that year. If that
So,
makes any sense.
that's very helpful because I think where that conversation might go is if, that'll be a reoccurring number. If that's a number that we can use elsewhere, it might be useful elsewhere. And I'll just leave it until y'all get done doing the deep dive, if that makes sense.
And what I've
I'm not going to poke that bear, but I remember even in the last meeting, I had my eyes focused on that $500,000. And I was like, well, wait a minute. Is it the 1% or is it this? Okay, now that we've touched it, but we're beginning the conversation before June 13th, perhaps we'll know where it could go or where we could.
We have time past June to talk about that.
Right.
We have, and as Keith said, we know what a 1% is, timing-wise, when do you do the transfer into the fund? And so we can work through that as well. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
As a general rule, we don't like to tie up too much money in something that's going to happen 3 years from now because it sits unused, and we have pressing needs every year for things that need to be done that year. And it's more like if we know the number's coming and we know when it is, then we'll plan on it as part of the 10-year CIP. That's it for my presentation. Questions?
Run for your life.
We pretty much interrupted you and asked questions as we went along. Are there any other questions that you have?
Tutorial on the gosh darn swap fund, because I really have never understood what it is, how much we need to have in it, and honestly, you know, looking at it chilling right there, not being directed to any of the capital needs, just makes me wonder, is that a $1.5 million source of, you know, is any of that money wiggle room money that we could use on an annual basis or not?
It is money that you all have dedicated to the capital financing plan fund. I think you would have
But
to.
it's not going to anything.
It's been building up. We've used some of it over the past years. I'm not using any this year,
Right.
but I'm planning on using it in 23, 24, 24, 25, 25, 26. Not all of it, but a chunk of it.
In this year, and that won't mess up your plans for future years or not?
It's a model, and I don't know that it would. I could say right now, if you had to have $1 million of it, sure, you could take it. I can say, in theory, if everything is hunky-dory for the next 3 years, it won't mess it up. But I don't know how to answer. I can't answer that definitively. Okay. The key is if you all as a group want to take $1 million out of it and do something with it, it's one-time money. Do not, in my opinion, put it towards something that we're then going to be in the hole for a continued cost in 23, 24 of that million or whatever magical number you want to appropriate it for. That would be the kind of place where we got the 1% and Linda Salguero comes and says, oh, we've got $1 million art installation across 3 buildings. We've only got 500,000 and I need $1 million more. I would go to that fund balance and we'd come to the board and we'd do a budget amendment and we'd put it into that fund and there you'd go. That's kind of where that money is housed. That's how I would use it. But it doesn't preclude you all from using it for something else. Just caution you to use it for one-time use if possible.
Here you, Commissioner Jacobs.
Thank you. I think one thing I did want to stress, big picture-wise, is that the CIP is not for $1.3 billion. The 10-year. It's actually 1.8 that we're spending, and that we're using all these different mechanisms to fund it. I think this is so complicated, and I just want to make sure it's clear. Right. And that half of that money, more than $900 million of the $1.8 billion, is for DPS funding needs. Because kind of similar to, I know what's gotten, Commissioner Burns has commented a few times about the community, first of all, saying they want us to do a $40 million bond for renewable energy. Well, the fact is, in our CIP, we actually have $31.5 million for renewable energy, but we don't need to necessarily do a bond for it.
Right.
We actually we are going to fund it, but we have other ways to do it. I think the public gets kind of focused on this idea like that everything has to be funded through a bond. Right. And so, I just want to stress that just because we're not doing a geo bond for it doesn't mean we're not funding it, and that it's important for people to look at the entire CIP. The other thing I wanted to say was I think it's significant looking at our CIP how much we're putting into IS&T. When I look at the different budget areas that we're spending a lot of money for that, and over $106 million, but it's a reality. I just read last night that Russian hackers have hacked into the Costa Rican government's. They've shut down the government in Costa Rica, and so this is very serious in today's world, and we already experienced. So it's unfortunately a necessary investment. One thing I also wanted to highlight is, and I wonder if it could be maybe added into some of our documentation, that I think it's really critical that in terms of the caveats, a really, really big caveat is our reval 2025. Like, we're going to do a reval in 2025. We know we're going to do a reval in 2025. We have to because of state law. That is something, I mean, so in other words, that's a caveat. We know what's going to happen, and we don't know. We may end up finding a lot. We may get, depending on what we set the tax rate at, we may not have to do a 3.1 cent tax increase. So I just think that's really important to maybe have on that slide there, that, you know, this is happening this year, because again, I think we just, that just seems like a really big uncertainty, because you've got 26, 27, we're going to do a bond, and I think it would be good to put that where you've got the 3.1 cents. It doesn't say.
I have built-in estimated growth in what 1 cent of tax would bring in based off a reval. The question is my percentage growth correct with what?
It would be interesting to see that.
Yeah, we build in those kinds of factors. But as we get closer, we can refine.
All right, that would be interesting to see. And then this is like really persnickety of me, but on the chart listing our CIP projects, like it was in the beginning, I would love to see the DSS main not be described as a renovation project, but as a reuse project.
Yes, ma'am.
Because that we're not renovating that building. We're actually focused on reusing it. So that was just one request or suggestion. Thank you.
We can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Commissioners, there are no timelines on our agenda today, so I'm going to make up some. Does that work for you? Okay, it does. Okay, so looking at the items, the next item is Durham Public Schools, budget overview, and then we have Durham Technical Community College. So we've got two meaty items to discuss, and then we have more questions. So an hour, is an hour enough for you? Superintendent? Okay. So let's go ahead and get started with Durham Public Schools, and we'll out of that one, and then we'll go to Durham Tech.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, Manager, thank you for the opportunity again to come in a formal setting to present our highlights of our budget, which we already submitted a while ago. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to our CFO, Paul Lassure, and to quickly introduce our budget analyst, Alex, to be able to go through the slide. Paul.
Good afternoon, County Commissioners. How are you all doing today? Good. Today I come to you with this budget presentation. This proposed budget, I'm not going to use any slide. I'll bring it over to Alex. This budget was developed starting back in December. Our Board of Education has seen it multiple times. We had started at the $12.875 million request. We brought it to the Board of Education as the superintendent's proposed budget. We moved it, and they accepted that at that time. Of course, they have till May 15th to be able to say that their budget is looking to be changed from the superintendent's proposed budget. And at the April 24th board meeting, they chose to maintain the same level of funding that the superintendent proposed for 2022-23. So this is the $12.8 million request that we started with, and I believe we presented that to you back in the early January, February timeframe as well. So I'm going to turn this over to the Executive Director of Budget, Alex Modestu, so he can bring you through this presentation.
Good afternoon, board members and Dr. Soul. I love having the button, very, very useful. So mainly what I'm just going to focus on with our time here, and I appreciate the opportunity, is some of the follow-up questions that you all had, and just kind of going over some of those in detail, because the rest we've seen, reviewed, we've discussed before. So in our budget request of $12,875,000, we had the $5.3 million, which is for costs we know that we're going to incur in the upcoming fiscal year, the 2.5% salary increases that are in the state 21, 22, 23 biennium budget. Those could change in the upcoming short session, but we know we have those costs. The health insurance and the retirement rates that are set out in that Appropriations Act are known costs. We have our utilities, our property and liability insurance, our other fixed costs that we know we review our historical trends. We know we're going to incur these. And that was $5.3 million of the request. We had our salary supplement increase, which would increase the teacher salary supplement by about $1,135 for all of our teachers, and it would also increase the minimum pay. That's with a step increase. It would also increase the minimum pay from $5,675 to $6,500. We had our operation expanding costs for bringing on a new facility at Lions Farm. We had a proposal with moving to our one-to-one digital initiative of moving some of the funding for the IT support that we're using with temporary ARPA funds, moving that to local. So for a total of $10.3 million for DPS, and in order to receive that, we also have to increase funding for charter schools by approximately $2.6 million. So that's the request that we went over in our joint meeting with you all in the February work session. And not having any proposed increases for our annual appropriations for the Whitted School or for our annual appropriations for capital outlays, which, as Keith mentioned, are different from things that go into the GEO bond, in that these are routine building maintenance that is more on a year-to-year basis. It may not necessarily add value to the assets that we already have, and won't necessarily have a 20-year useful life. So it's not something that would be a best practice to fund from debt service, and you all have graciously increased our annual operating appropriation for those routine building maintenance in the past fiscal year, and we're very appreciative of that. So just a little bit more information that you all requested about the teacher salary supplements. The light blue line was prior to Dr. Mubenga's administration, where salary supplements were far lower. The, we'll call it, not quite Carolina, not quite Duke blue line in the middle is where we currently are, and the Duke blue line at the top is the request from the superintendent to increase the starting supplement to $6,500, and with the step increases that teachers would have as a part of this, the teachers will receive, current teachers would receive $1,135 in additional local salary supplements from you all with this proposal. And so we had some questions from you all following the county manager's proposed budget. First, there's a lot of text here, just for you to have as for reference, but I'm just going to focus on the question was, if we were to receive $9.875 instead of $12.875 million, what would that put us? How do we manage that? So if we got that, DPS would receive about $7.9 million, and the remaining $1.975 would be passed through to charters. Of the 7.9 million, 5.3 million would be for those fixed costs that I had laid out in advance, things that we know that we will incur and could actually be higher depending on what happens in the short session that just started. That only leaves us with $2.6 million remaining, which is 65% of that $4 million request for the recurring cost of increasing the teacher salary supplements. So that would be something that we would be, it wouldn't be a best practice financially to take on that obligation, or that recurring obligation, with only 65% of the cost secured for that. For the other proposals that we had about the IT workstation technicians, we could continue, rather than we had planned, we could continue to use our ESSER funds, which is a subset for K-12 public schools of the CARES Act and then the CRSA and the ARP. We could continue to use ESSER funds for those workstation technicians and not transition them to locally. That still builds us a little bit more of a cliff as we face the expiration of our ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funds in September of 23 and then September of 24, but it's doable right now. And we could rely on lap salaries, which are not guaranteed, but is a high likelihood potentially to offset expansion costs for running a new elementary school, Lions Farm. So those are two things that would be workable. But we would, in order to make sure that we had the recurring funding to support the teacher salary supplements, we would need at least $11.875 million rather than the $9.875 million that was in the county manager's budget. Otherwise, that would be putting too much pressure on relying on lap salaries, which is not sustainable per se in the future, especially with other costs that we could incur that aren't known yet because the short session has just begun. That was sort of the first set of questions we had. There was another set of questions that pertained to what about $15 an hour? Where is DPS with regards to this? And we have a PDF, I believe, that has some more details. But when you all approved the increase to move DPS to $15 an hour, we implemented that in the 2020-21 fiscal year. So that was the previous fiscal year. And what we did that's different from what the state has proposed is we didn't just pay anyone who was making less than $15 an hour, $15 an hour, which would have greatly compressed all of the salary schedules. We've actually moved our minimum to 15 and then increased it from there. So right now we have slightly less than 10% of our classified staff that are in the first year of experience in certain positions are at the, well, and I'll get to that in a second, but, and we also didn't, in addition to not just compressing our salary schedules, we went ahead and said, no, we're going to continue to lift the floor. So when the state finally, this year, after 2 years of no increases, they finally gave us 2.5%, we said, all right, we're going to move from $15 an hour that we had last year with you all's support to $15.38. And similarly, next year, in the second year of the biennium, we're going to move the minimum wage to $15.78 as we continue to receive these and are trying to recruit and retain staff that are essential to operating Durham Public Schools. So we have details that you can see on our compensation subpage, but now I'm going to focus on the state because there's a lot of moving parts and pieces on this. So what the state did is they said for this current fiscal year, 21-22, that they're providing funding for a $13 an hour minimum wage for state-funded employees. And in the upcoming 22-23 fiscal year, they're going to move to a $15 an hour minimum wage. However, that is not moving the floor and then shifting every grade and step along. That's a collapse of the salary schedules that districts would have, just saying we're going to give you just enough money in theory for any state-funded employee who doesn't make 15 to make exactly 15, which is not workable for most districts. And furthermore, before they figured out how much money they were going to allocate for districts to do this, they surveyed all of the districts and had us report to them all of our staff, their exact hourly rates, in granular detail. And at the time that they surveyed us in the 2020-21 fiscal year, DPS was already at $15 an hour, Charlotte-Mecklenburg was already at $15 an hour, and several other large school districts. And really, when you're talking about even the top 5 or so districts in the state are more than 25% of the overall population, and the top 10 are close to 50%. But a lot of districts had already, just by virtue of the pressures from the economy, moved in that direction. So they factored that in when they were looking at this, and they're not looking at moving the minimum to 15 and then pushing that all along. So bottom line, end of the story is that we didn't take that approach, And when we actually calculated what we got in our budget revisions, because they didn't really pass a budget until almost January. We couldn't implement this year's salary increases until January of 2022, which is a nightmare to figure out all the retro pay. But when they gave us that allotment increase and we compared it against what was initially allotted before they had actually passed a budget, we only got approximately $243,000 in additional money for the $13 an hour increase that was implemented this year. And then I'm projected, based on that and everything else, that we're going to get approximately $267,000 with the 15% increase next year. So it's a total of about $510,000 that we're getting over the 2 years, this year and next fiscal year, for that state shift. And so that's good, but it's not, for example, we were still in a $900,000 hole in the sense that we passed finally in December of 2019, we passed a budget for classified salary increases. Despite the state not taking any action, we used the local money that you all had given us that was going to support part of this, and we were anticipating state money. We didn't get it, so we used the local money to pay for about half of the year of our classified salary increases. But then in 2021, the state yet again did not pass a budget, and we were on the hook for all 12 months of those increases. So that's put us in a $900,000 hole. Now, fortunately, we've had lapsed salaries that have helped offset that hole, but it's something that we've been carrying along ever since then. And so the $15 an hour increase based on what we received this year and what we anticipate to receive next year isn't covering that hole that was established based on the second year in a row of the legislature not providing a dollar for any school-based classified employees. So that's sort of the picture of where we are right now. And we could pause there if you want. And then another big question that you all had was about just going over. And I believe we've talked about it in a work session, but this is kind of an update of spending as of, I believe, May 15th of where we are with all of our federal COVID funds. Or I'll turn it back before we change gears to that.
Let me add just one more piece. I think some of the comments that we received from the community that DPS has been at $15 already. Now that the state is giving you that bump to get everybody to 15, you guys should be at 17. So that's pretty much the rationale of Alex explaining this. With limited fund that we're able to receive, yes, we're giving about 38% increase. Then next year we're going to be probably 15, 70 something. It's not going to be 16. It's not going to be 17, based on the funding that we've been able to receive.
Will have the employees up at 17 rather than at 15? 15.78. And what's the increase from the state? I thought you said something about 17.
The fact that the state gave us an increase, since DPS has been $15 already, we should be able to get to 16 or 17. But all the explanation Alex was able to give to you, the fund was not enough for us to be able to get our folks to 17 from the beginning and be able to spread it out all the way to 30 years. So the fund was not enough to be able to increase everyone from 0 step all the way to 30.
So what's the gap?
What's the gap? It was not enough for us to be able to appropriate the way the bulk of the sum was given by the state without using the scale that we have to be able to. It was pretty much compressed.
Okay, so my question is, given that you said it wasn't enough, so what is enough?
How much enough?
So, the $510,000 that we estimate over the 2 years wasn't even enough to sort of dig us out of a hole of locally sustaining classified salary increases that were issued in December of 2019. So that the additional amount is, I believe it's approximately $4.3 million of if we were to have a starting salary of 17 and beyond from there. But the $510,000 in additional money that we're getting from the state isn't enough to cover that hole. There's other holes that we've been experiencing, like I've discussed before, that, for example, the county as a whole has a lower overall rate of families that are economically disadvantaged than it has in the past. However, the rate of economically disadvantaged families in Durham has not changed substantively. We've lost almost it's about $860,000 this year we've lost in state funding on that regard because the county demographics are changing slightly. So there's a lot of we get dozens and dozens of different appropriations from state funds.
I'm sorry, I don't know if it's anybody else or not, but you're talking about, what, how many years in the past? You're talking about, what's it, 2000 and, you said 19? So you're saying, you're talking about 2019, and we're talking about, this is 2022, so you are confusing me with how far are we going back? So can you help me to understand what are we talking about? When I don't have those numbers in front of me, it's very difficult for me to follow what you're saying. Is that, am I right?
Yeah, so let's say that let's ignore all of the past per se. Let's just say we'll have to cover those any other which way. To start DPS classified pay at $17 an hour it was approximately 4.3 or 4.4 million. We're getting $510,000 from the state. So if we could just say that that will offset with no caveats, no provisos, no look at other losses that we've received from other state revenue sources. Of the $4.4 million it would cost, say, then we would be looking at $3.9 million that we would have to cover. That the state would be covering about $510,000. We would be on the hook for about $3.9 million.
And can I just ask a clarifying question? Does that mean when you're looking at the $4 million, are you saying you need the $4 million to raise the salary schedules of everyone, the entire salary schedule? So this is not just the baseline, the staff that needs to raise up to 17 million. They're talking about their entire staff, making sure that there are no compression issues that arise by raising the floor. So, and I think that's a little different than what you all were, and I think Commissioner Burns had something.
We have saw in the budget, so this is a little bit different from what I saw anyway.
So one of the things, if I may clarify, the state appropriated $31 million to move to $13 an hour. Normally, Durham Public Schools would get anywhere from 2 to 2.53% of that money. In the way that they funded that $31 million, we got $243,000, where we should have gotten $600,000 to move us forward and be at the $13 plateau. That would have been more whole funding than what the state provided us this fiscal year.
Okay. I understand all this. I don't need to talk about this slide. This is a red herring. Go back to slide 6, Alex. I don't have no questions about 8. Now, I like to think I'm a smart woman. I can't tell because some of the emails I've got, some of the comments I've got, based on I've been called stupid. Frank and Judy Burns ain't raised no stupid kids. So let's see how smart I am today. Let's just figure this out. Now, I know y'all got screwed over the $100 million. And maybe I'm not supposed to say screwed in the meeting, but y'all did. 5 counties didn't get it for the rest of their teachers. When I met with you, I ain't met with you, Mr. LaSoy, didn't meet with you, Mr. Modesta, but I did meet with your board members. Now, it's a few board members out there telling the truth. It's 2 liars that y'all got over there. And the sad part is y'all going to be stuck with them 2 liars for 4 more years. So that $9.8 million that we gave y'all, I like how if you look at the top of this chart, yes, I know the first thing that we have to do, we have to go back and catch the money that we have to give for insurance and for retirement. The same money y'all got to give for retirees, that's the same money we got to do. We got to do 11.8, right? So I don't have no problem with that because that makes sense. Like we have to do that. So I don't have a problem with that. The $6,500 for the teacher supplemental pay, go back and look at every single meeting. Not one person up here said that we didn't want our teachers to have the high supplemental pay. Go back, not one woman, I'm not going to say people because it's all women, not one woman said that we didn't want teachers to have the $6,500. Now, we're going to look at this second bullet, and we're going to start telling the truth. Because you all have it in this order, and it looks like teachers were last. Nobody up here said that teachers should be last. Nobody up here said we didn't want to do $6,500 in supplemental pay, because if I'm not mistaken, y'all told, I remember I asked to go back to the slide. I said, does that mean we will have the highest supplemental pay in the state? I think you answered in the affirmative, and I said, let's do it. So let's go right here to the 7.9 million that's left, and it says 5.3 million is needed for 2.5% in salary increase for certified and classified. Now, for certified and classified, somebody correct me if I'm wrong right now. Certified and classified is bus drivers? Is that, can I get a yes? All right. For the cameras, that is an affirmative. So that's bus drivers. Is that lunchroom workers? Right. Is that our custodians? All right. And that also includes instructional assistants. So that is what $5.3 million is, correct? Okay, on February 4th, or for whatever date that was that number $5.3 million? Because we got asked, what did we do in our chart? We said 1 million for classified, it was for bus drivers and lunchroom. So it was 5.3, everybody in here saying it was 5.3 million on that day. I'm gonna tell y'all, what, somebody else right now tell me what law states that we, because I got some confusion. I asked my staff, so I'm going to ask y'all. What law states that we have to give 18.1 to charters? And that's not me attacking public schools. I just want to know, because there are other systems that don't work that way. I'm asking because I want some clarification, because I will no longer, especially when I can look back on the cameras and see that I said that you all could have funding for that. I push for funding when we talk about this fight for 15, let's just go back to that first vote that Commissioner Lom and I had. We didn't just say we want to move up to $15 an hour and start it in January. We went back as a board and caught it back 6 months later to what was it, August or July. So we went back. So how we have been turned into bullies to be called stupid, to be called light, because that's what's been coming at us. Like, we haven't done it. When Sunny came up here the other day, I understood she was hurting and she wanted that $17 an hour. But it was all, and she said $15 is not enough. And I hear that, and I know people who work them. But y'all act like we ain't did anything. Like, absolutely. Like, we didn't come in here guns blazing last year trying our best to make this math work. And Commissioner Chair Howerton asked the other day, she says, y'all go find me $2 million. She did. She told staff that. Commissioner Jacobs just sent 17 questions in where she's been basically a forensic accountant and found, tried to find $2 million from somewhere else. So we're sitting here, and as a board, I don't know how many times I called Claudia this week trying to find this money for y'all. But you know who ain't called us to talk to us about this? The board members. They've been going and talking to everybody else saying, where's our money, ginning up all this anger in the community. I left DPS the other day, and I had to buy 4 tires. That was $952. And your board members know it. And I said nothing. I didn't attack anybody. And we've been sitting here doing the best that we can, trying to figure out where we're going to find this $2 million for. So you are, no one on your board has even called. I got an email right now from an EC teacher, and I feel bad for what she's going through. But you all come in here today, and not one of your board members has reached out to one person on this board to advocate for that $2 million. Not one. And so I'm going to stop there, because the way that this thing is lined up, it's like we don't care. But I do want to question, can anybody tell me what is the statute that says we have to give that much? And I do want to throw this other thing out. I want to throw something else out. We've made, I don't know where Keith and David are. They probably ran away. It's okay. You can stay there. You hiding behind David. David, I don't know how he did that. Here it is. We made $32.2 million. Is that how much we made? Right, in natural growth, about $30 million. And for people to say that we don't care about schools is really insulting, because 33% of that went on top of the $14 million that we gave last year. So it's not that we don't care. It's not that we don't care. Commissioner Carter and I 3 times said we think the school board should have a raise. We said we thought y'all needed a lobbyist because we thought y'all got robbed for not getting that $100 million. Like every day we're out here talking, and it's almost, and we talk to your board members, but then you all go out, and I shouldn't jump on y'all. Mr. Lasso, I ain't jumping on you. Alex Modesta, let me be very honest. When I was running for county commission, I didn't know as much about the school until I pulled your PowerPoints from back when you were in NC State. So the only reason why I noticed a little bit about what I'm talking about is because of the work you did. Dr. Mubinga, I think you do a great job there. I got parents that eat, sleep, and breathe you because of what you've done for your children. But guess what? We're not going to continue to be treated like this, and we're just not. We're absolutely, positively not. Not when I know when everybody up here goes out and talks to parents and talk to kids, and they fight for kids, and then we have people who are upset at us simply because the messaging doesn't give out. And I know our comms team is trying, but it makes absolutely no sense to me that every time folks come to us, it's as if we didn't do anything. On that nonprofit sheet, one of the questions she asked, she says, why did we only put, and now David, I am looking at you and Keith now, you only put $50,000 in there for nonprofits. You know what we didn't add in there 2 weeks ago? Did we not do an expansion of a pre-K classroom? I think it was in the affordable housing. We added 86 new seats, and I think that was $500,000. Perry Mann's staff came to us. That's nowhere in there. That $150,000 that we did for it was communities and schools, not in there. Right now, Mr. Kaysen has reached out to me, and I know a couple other people, and say, hey, why is this funding not in here? And we're shutting down our lives to go find it. To say, okay, we'll figure out how we're gonna do it. So I'm gonna stop there because I'm not going to have my life threatened. I'm not going to have my family's life threatened. I'm not going to sit here and have people. I sent y'all an email last year about how these parents came at me after we gave the $15 an hour, after we gave y'all funding for the chillers. So what I'm asking after this budget cycle is on, somebody over there need to have a Coming to Jesus meeting with some of these organizations about how they talk to the 5 women up here. That's number one. Number two, I don't know. You got the 3 votes you need because I know she's looking for the money. I know that Commissioner, the chair and the vice chair have both went over here and asked for it. This is not how business gets done. Business is not done by bullying, by fake political posturing, by performative theatrics over at y'all's chambers. It's just not how it gets done. Everybody else turned in their stuff on time. Everybody else turned in their stuff on time. And because it was a group, and I think it's fair that Sonny and them asked for that, that nobody argued that for them with me. I know because I talked to about 5 of your board members. Nobody made that argument to me. And when I called each one of them on the phone, I was like, well, why didn't y'all tell me this before the day that Kim broke the embargo on the budget? So y'all gonna get y'all way this year because we're gonna sacrifice and do what we have to do, and we're gonna call other departments that turned in their stuff on time and say, hey, you gotta tighten your belt. Not because of anything you did, but because we care about kids in Durham. We actually do care about kids in Durham. I don't have to have children to be an advocate for kids. I don't. There are a lot of teachers that don't have children. I think the fact that the majority, 80% of the kids in Durham Public Schools look like me and they look up to me, and that's more than enough to be adequate to make me an advocate for them. And in this budget, I don't see not one line item that's specifically for kids. Not one. But that we're going to prove it in 2 weeks. So I'm getting off my soapbox. I'm saying all this now because nobody ever calls me back when I call them. Y'all can go ahead.
May I make some comments here? I'll start by saying thank you for the opportunity for us to be able to come and present. I think I've worked with all county commissioners in the past, one-on-one. I've worked really close with manager in the past as well. So my job is not to bring you any surprises. And I think you all know the way I work with my board. I really wanted to bring a realistic budget to you. If it were just my board, it should have been about $17 or $18 million. And I really wanted us to be able to have an approach of bringing certified employees first. Even though my classified employees, they're not happy at this point, I just wanted us to be really realistic. That's what I've been communicating with staff here. The $12.8 million was known by your staff probably by February already because they've been communicating with my staff. So when I used my verbiage last time when we met, I said I pleaded with you. I don't demand, no, I pleaded with you. So I think just a tough time for all of us. As I met with all the largest superintendents yesterday in Raleigh, it's really tough. As we all know across the nation, folks are having a hard time, especially to live in the RTP area. I really wanted to push this supplement because if we don't, it's going to be really hard. While I have teachers driving all the way from Person County, Mabin, Sanford, without a good increase, they're going to stay where they are. So again, I'm going to finish by saying this. If there is a better way that I'll be able to get my board to be able to communicate with you, that's what I'll push behind the scene. We all pretty much want the same thing. But I don't want you guys to be able to be increasing taxes in a very unrealistic way. But if we can do what is possible to meet our needs and without very going to one extreme, that's the balance that I'm going to continue trying to be in the middle. I'm grateful, like I said before, it's during my tenure that we are building those schools. It took a lot of work with you all, one-on-one, to get to this point. For that reason, I'm grateful. Any misunderstanding in the community with parents, teachers, I will do my best to be in the middle, to publicly say that our county commissioners funded us really well. If I hear some comments that folks are saying that we're not funded well, yes, we are funded really well. And I'm also obligated to make sure that we deliver the quality instruction that all our students deserve. It's been a really tough political campaign. I took some good notes of everything that has been said, and I own it, and we're going to make sure that our kids get what they deserve. To our Commissioner Burns, when you're looking at our budget, state, federal, all those things pretty much address the needs of our students. Not only compensating teachers, but I work really hard even to put money at school. For the past 2 years, I'll give $20 per student. I'll give an example. Jordan High School, they may have about 2,000 students. I'll give $20 to make sure that they have $40,000 to be able to incentivize students. So I always make sure that some of our students don't like to work for free. You got to have funds in the general fund to be able to address those needs. Yes, our students are a priority. If we can get better teachers here, I think they're going to serve our students as well. Thank you.
And Commissioner Burns, I'll verify that statute. It's general statute 115C 238. I believe it's either G or H that states that we have to fund charter schools on the same per pupil amount as we receive from the county commissioners.
And so that's how you said it, but y'all always do 18.1, or is it 19.1? So it's whatever the 43 number, like whatever number we come up with that year, that's what you all then multiply by the heads of students in the charter schools?
Charter school, yeah. So for the purpose, that 19.2% comes out of every dollar that we receive from the county commissioners. This year's $150 million plus. Those dollars, we have to take that and divide that by the charter school enrollment.
I get it.
As well as Durham Public School enrollment on a monthly basis. What we receive for appropriations and fines and forfeitures, we have to share that per pupil amount with them.
Anyway, back to the other one. So, we went to staff, and staff told us that there was no statute. I will double check that when I'm looking at who wrote it down now. I believe you, Mr. LeSueur. The only thing I'm going to say, the last thing I'm going to say, when we were at your meeting the other day, this looks like it's 11.875, but you all are absorbing Lions Farm, and you're also absorbing the Essers. So that will be waiting for us in a couple of years. It'll probably be waiting for us post-2026. I'm not asking a question. I'm just saying that is a fact. Like, it will be waiting for us. And even with Lions Farm, I didn't have any problem because I think what the state just gives you, we have to do like the vice principal and the administrative staff. That day, we didn't say anything about not funding that. So I do just want folks to know that when ESSERS runs out, when ARPA runs out in 2026, that will be there too. I'm not saying that we're not going to do it. I'm just saying this has got to be done in a different way. It cannot be 2-3 years in a row that we're going to throw something else back on y'all, because it was 12.8. Y'all, it was 12.8 before y'all absorbed this. The one-to-one, because I talked to your board chair about the 58 folks for it was 58 for the IT stations. That was 515. That was in there in that presentation. Thank you, Mr. Somebody. So even though you all are absorbing that now, and you're also absorbing the folks from Lions Farm, and it's still 11. If you all were not absorbing that, it would be more than 12.8. Does everybody understand? So that's why I'm saying, like, this is still an additional cost. It's not like we're making, you absorbing that doesn't take away from the fact that A, it was there before. If you weren't absorbing that, that number would actually be higher. Right? If you, like you're saying, additional DPS need to rely on LAPS to pay for additional Lions Farm staff. The presentation that we got in February requested that funding from us. Thank you. So, yes, it requested that funding from us. So you all are absorbing it now. Like, let's just pretend you all were not absorbing, because it says 20, it was 58, what was it, 55 or 58 IT technicians, and that was $515,000. I cannot remember how much it was for that. If you all were not absorbing that now, it would be higher than that. Bless you. So that would be 485 plus 515. So are you saying, I'm going to help me clarify, are you all saying that you all want to absorb that cost until 2026 with lap salaries and with ESSER, correct?
I say correct. I think if we're looking at 12.8, if we absorb approximately about $1 million, so we're going to remain with about 11.8. That's the reason why what county manager recommended was showed $3 million. We say with $2 million, we'll be able to accomplish our mission.
No, we're on the same page. I really want y'all to go back and look at this thing and look at the conversation that we had. And even, wait a minute, teacher salary where is, because I just asked Alex that. So there it is. If you look, all right, so for certified teachers, for certified and classified staff, that's 875, 850, and then 1 million. And I'm not trying to nickel and dime this thing. So let's just say that all of those are 3 million. Let's see, I'm gonna round it up from 875 and say it's $1 million. I'm gonna round up classified salary and say it's $1 million. And then of course the bus drivers, we're gonna say that's 3 million. Can we go back to slide 8? 6, I'm sorry. All right, in the second bullet, it says 5.3 million, right? Show me how, and I go back to the other side and somebody just help me. Maybe I'm emotional, I don't know. The 5.3 right here, that is everything with retirement and everything else at the bottom. But you're telling me, when I read that last time, and when we called and we asked your staff, and when I asked the other folks, they said the 5.3 million, they said it was just 2 million for those other 2 positions. And you're telling me now that that's retirement, that's everything. And you're not absorbing any of that.
So I guess what we're saying is that this 12.875 has been the request all along since February, including the 5.3 million at the top of fixed costs. And we're saying that we can take the hit with Lions Farm and the IT right now, and we could go with 11.875 rather than 12.875, which is the request. We'll take the hit on Lions Farm and IT and absorb those, but the rest of those is the funding that we're requesting of the 11.875. And sorry.
We're all in agreement on that. I'm going to move on because I'm taking up time for my board members. I've said what I had to say. I see J.B. Buxton and his staff here. Like I said, we're all in agreement with where we need to move forward for this. It's just this was done in a very unprofessional manner. And I'm not saying that you 3 gentlemen, I'm saying this entire process was done unprofessionally, but I'm going to hush now.
Let me ask one question and then go to Wendy. Do we have a report about how your aqua fund is spent? Do we have a report on that?
Yes, ma'am, and we can, that's at the end of this presentation. We can go over those quickly, or we can.
So the other question is, I'm looking at this chart, and what I don't see is the, or is that someplace else, the allocation for school board?
Yeah, that's not in this.
Okay, that's something.
But that's,
All right, Mr. Jacobs.
Yes, thank you. I just had a few follow-up. Well, So I think first of all, I just want to acknowledge the role that the decreasing enrollment is playing, because, so I guess, am I right that the coming year it's projected that there'll be 1,055 less students? Is that correct? And I don't know, is that DPS plus charter, or, or what is the number that is projected to be decreased from last year's projected enrollments?
So our estimated enrollment for funding purposes from the state is approximately 31,300. That's just what we use they give us for planning allotments for us to try to build our state budget for next year. When we get our actual month 1 and month 2 enrollment, if our enrollment is at least 100 students more than that, then we request, and then they will adjust all of our various state fundings. But for our planning purposes, the state has us at approximately 31,300 students that they estimate for DPS, not charters, just DPS.
Okay. I think it would be really helpful for us to see the numbers, just even for the, past 10 years of, what was projected, what the actual enrollment was, and then what we provided in our funding, because I think it's important to note that, especially the trends in the last few years, is that the enrollment has been lower, and we don't ask for that money back. We allocate that funding, and we don't. And then when we fund next year, we're building on the amount that we gave last year. And again, even though, so we're continuing to fund more money per pupil when, in essence, there are less students. And I think this is something that's really important for the community to understand. And I would like to really understand how Durham Public Schools is using that money. I know that there are obviously base costs. There's a slide where you reference that there's certain base costs. But I would really like to understand, how are you all coping with the, changes in enrollment? And are you looking at opportunities for efficiencies? Whether it means, having less classrooms, or, just, how administratively, operationally, that can, if you all are looking at that. Because the reality is, big picture, we're all dealing with this. Durham County, we have high vacancy rates. We had, $56 million worth of requests and funding. We had requests for 100 additional positions, and I know the county manager has gone back to our departments and said, zero-based budgeting, and you need to look at using your vacancies. I know I'm chair of the DSS board, and I know we asked for a lot of positions, and we're getting no increased funding. The entire department. The only thing we're getting is some additional money for foster care, $275,000. But I just say that within context because, we have critical needs in DSS too. With what's happening in our community, people are struggling and they're coming for more services, which means more applications, more work for staff, and then again, huge vacancies. And so, we are just internally having to go and look at how can we relook at our positions. And so I guess I would like to hear more, not now, obviously, about that. Because this is not just for now, but it's for the future, that basically if the state keeps underfunding education, which is what they're doing, and this is the source of our problem, is the state of North Carolina is not adequately funding education. They're not paying educators and school workers what they deserve, and it is really a crisis. They're not paying to maintain and build new schools, and so it's all falling on us at the county level, and we don't have the money. We're just going to have to tax and tax and tax our residents, and it's not fair to them, especially those who are struggling with rising costs for gas and food and rent. So I think all of us have to really, really be creative and look. I agree that staff, all Durham Public School staff should be the priority. You know, this really is painful to look at how many of your workers that are making $15.34 an hour. And I would just ask you all to please look at your budget and see what you can give to instructional workers. Because when we provide funding to you, you can do whatever you want with it. I mean, you know, if we give you $10 million more, $11 million more on top, and it's 176, whatever it is, you can do whatever you want with that money. It's not up to us. And I don't think that the community understands that. And, you know, we're not going to tell you what to do with that money. But I do personally, you know, we're saying that with the county budget, we are putting our staff first. And so I would ask everyone to do whatever you can for that. But I think it's important to understand that we are continuing to build on what we gave you the year before per student, even though the enrollments are declining at this point. The other thing is I'm really glad to see you saying that you can do the Lions Farm and the technology positions, because that is reflecting what we are doing at the county level, looking at within our vacancies and within our ARPA funding to help plug our holes at this point. So I really appreciate that. Let me just see what other questions or comments I wanted to make. And I do want to also say something really positive, which is the performance measures that in our budget book. And I know they stopped at 2019 because, of course, COVID. But you all are making progress, and I want the community to understand that. According to, and came up during the election, according to the performance measures in the strategic plan, under your leadership, Dr. Mbenga, Durham Public Schools is making progress on all those measures, and I applaud you and all of the staff and everybody who is a part of that. I know that COVID has been devastating to nowhere else more than we see in our children, in our youth, and all of our teachers. So let's all work together, and let's put all of our staff first, and however we choose to use our funding. Thank you.
I don't really have that much to add. I think that the comments today have been really pointed and meaningful and excellent. We do, the five of us, and county commissioners always really have had a history of caring and prioritizing our public schools. We want our public schools to be the best in the state, and our per pupil funding is high. It's not quite the highest in the state, but we're close. I think every year we try to press the manager to provide as close to full funding as possible, which is why we've been asking to try to pay that surcharge, so to speak, for charter schools. Because, as Commissioner Burns said, when we saw this in February, we agreed with it. We want to have the best teachers. We know that's probably the most effective way to improve student outcomes within the school setting anyway. And so we want the teacher supplements to go up. So way to go for planning for that, and thanks for asking for it. And, you know, in general, I think we're all really worried as well about the public employees, every public employee in the city, in the county, and in DPS, and the fact that they're not all making a living wage according to what it costs to live in Durham County, and that number is only going up. And we're not providing any funding to increase the certified staff salaries. And I don't know that we can, where it would come from. I know we're scouring our budget, trying to understand it well enough to see if there's money we could shift around for that. But I feel like that is actually going to have to be a community conversation is, does this community have as a policy that we're going to pay our public employees a living wage? And if we do, how do we fund it across the three systems, across the three elected bodies? Because over 1,000, right, in DPS were not making, they were making in the 15s, right? They were not making 17 or 8. That chart you sent us today, there was 1,000 employees that I thought were making too little.
Yeah, we'll go over those specifics. I don't have it.
That's okay.
On the 17.
Something hit me today hard, and I believe it was just the number of certified staff that aren't making enough to live, to pay rent and pay utilities and pay for everything else that requires a person to live in Durham County. And so, I mean, our community's going to figure that out. We can't figure it out today, and we can't do it by ourselves. But I've been just mulling that over myself and really trying to figure out what is our philosophy on that, because I think as a board we want to have a policy that says we pay a living wage, and DPS has a living wage policy. It's just that we've all fallen short over time because of the escalating costs of living in this community. So and so I just wanted to be sure everyone understands in the community that we are in favor of, I think, meeting your $11.8 million request, so that you're going to absorb $1 million of the funding. I think, I don't know for sure, but that's the hint. That's the sense I'm getting. But that does not include the increase to bring classified staff up. Only it's really, and I assume you all are working on that, and will be planning for that, and we'll bring something forward to us in the future, and our whole community can figure out how the heck to do it, since the state is so abysmally underfunding us. In many ways, it always falls on the local level to make up that difference, and we give it our best shot. We try really hard. Anyway, thanks for the great request. Thanks for clarifying the request today. Thanks for listening to us. We've all had a fair bit to say, and just appreciate you being here.
Yes, just a couple points of clarity. So one, to add more context to Commissioner Jacobs' point about the enrollment. So she was referring to in 1920, fiscal year 1920, I think we funded at the enrollment of 32,596. And so when she talks about the decrease of 1,000 students, you acknowledge that the projections now are at 31,000. That's what she was referencing. And so because of our board's commitment to education, there has not been an ask to refund any of, the dollars that were allocated based at that funding level. And then secondly, just a question to make sure our board has all the information they need as we move forward. So the 1.97 on one of the slides that you all said would go towards charter schools, don't have to have this answer now, but do you have fund balance dollars, or are you able to allocate dollars from fund balance to cover that 1.97 million? Because that could be another source that the board may look to ask you to absorb some of the charter school allocation, so that more could go towards teacher salaries.
Thank you, Manager. Let me respond for the first one when it comes to enrollment. If we all recall, prior to the pandemic, DPS started growing. We grew about 500 students. I really wanted to make sure that everybody understands our records. I'm going to ask my staff to be able to submit to you the last probably 8 years, our enrollment trajectory, including the charter schools as well. So we're going to submit that. But at 2019, DPS grew about 500 students. As we declined about 1,300, that has been pretty much across the state due to the pandemic. We're anticipating, based on our planning, probably they're going to be about the next 5 years, about 20,000 more babies, school-age students will be ready. So we're just getting ready for that. So we're growing. We went down because of the pandemic. We're hoping everything that we're going to do possible, we're going to go back up. Number two, when it comes to fund balance, we can do that. But the problem is, it's going to be a recurring cost, which we're not going to be able to sustain every year. One time, we can do that, but we're not going to be able to sustain it. When it comes to DPS being funded, then our student enrollment going down, there are a lot of flexibility that we have when we have funds locally. I'll give you a couple examples. Our school counselors at a high school, they are funded by the state for 10 months. But there are needs for our school counselors to be there during the summer to make sure that those students that did not make the credits to graduate. So we are increasing some of those for 12 months. And I think it costs us about $200,000 or $300,000. Those are the funds that we don't come to you. We don't go to the states. They won't give it to us. We have that wiggle room to be able to address the need of those students. We have some students with us that we put them in a COPE program. Those are really students with extreme behavior problems. We're funding probably out of those 18 students, they may have a good 6 or 7 adults, behavior specialist, manager, you name those. We don't get those funds from the state. We don't come to ask you for those funds. Those are the extra dollars when you fund us. Even though our enrollment goes down, we have flexibility to meet the needs of those students. Those are just 2 examples. There are so many. But if you look at our budget, the way we project it on our website, you can look at central office, the percentage. It does not increase much because that's where a lot of folks go, say, you guys probably putting all this position at the central office. Just look at that, that percentage. We have not increased that much. So I just wanted to clarify those things. So we are willing to do any arrangement one time, but we're not going to be able to sustain recurring expenses that we have to give to charter school. Thank you, Manager.
So this has been a rich conversation, So 2018, I worked on a campaign over in Raleigh with the legislators, and this same conversation about school funding and even how tax dollars, not county tax dollars, but the state, how they could reallocate monies to school and to education, and there was no listening for it. And this was county commissioners from across the state. They were representatives from across the state in the room having a conversation about how do we fund education. Because everybody knows that the model that we have right now is not sustainable, that something has to change. Nobody's come up with that answer yet. But when you look at how much money that we are having to hit the community with, how much we have to raise taxes to take care of our little ones, to take care of education, the question remains, how do we continue in that vein? And that's a larger conversation than today. But, we are committed to our little ones, we're committed to education. And we, with our classifieds, we understand how difficult that is. Anybody that is a single parent and raising 4 children, and even if you haven't raised 4 children, when you go to the grocery store, the cost of bread costs you the same thing as it does for a rich person. Or the cost of gas, when you go to the gas station, it costs you the same thing as a rich person. So we understand that. We just have a fiduciary responsibility to be able to manage the resources in a way that we don't raise taxes if we don't have to. And sometimes the questions come back at you, and it's not intentional at you, but sometimes it sounds like there's a little bit of shifting of information that we don't get. So we just need to ensure that we get all the information so that we make the best decision possible. Let's see. And, Commissioner Jacobs talked about students declining, students have been declining, and what impact does that have on DPS? I don't think we know that yet. And I don't know if you know that yet, but we haven't been provided with that information. And it may not be having any impact yet, but it's got to be, if butts are not in the seats, it's making a difference. So it would be good for you to be able to provide this board with that kind of information so that we're not hit with it when we go out in the community. Because community asks us these questions. It's just like the questions we've had with Go Triangle and getting the finance report. When things are not done to the community's perspective, and we have anything to do with it, it has anything to do with their taxes, you know who they come after? Us. Because they expect us to know and they expect us to be responsible for it. So, if you have more information that you want to share with us, or where are you at this point?
Yeah, so for the sake of time, we could leave you with the information on the ESSER appropriations and field any follow-up conversations offline or in a subsequent meeting. We'd be happy to do that for the sake of time.
Now
Or
we
we
have
could
gone, yeah, we've used up this hour. If you've got something that you can share with us real quick, we'll take the time to do that. If you want, you've got,
think
take
we
about 5 to 10 more minutes and do that.
Okay, and just one last point, maybe for a little bit of clarification on a potential source of confusion, is that in October of this year, we increased the bus driver pay to $17 an hour because there were shortages everywhere. States were having to call in National Guard. If we wanted to keep the schools running, we had no choice but to do that. And actually, we were one of the first movers there. Wake County almost exactly copied our pay range after we did that, and that is the $1,050,000 component that's in that 5.3. Is we saw our vacancy rates. We said we have the ability to do this. If we don't do it, we're not going to be able to operate schools. So we increased their pay to 17, and that is part of this year's request, is the sustaining funds, or the recurring funds to sustain that. So that may be the source of a confusion, is that we had to do that in October, and then when the state finally passed a budget, we increased that again by 2.5%, so that the current range is $1,743 to $2,460 for our bus drivers. So that was the, and you know, those are the CDLs. The rest of our classified jobs, you don't have to have that class. It's just it's a different area. So that is the action that we were forced to take this year. If that clarifies it all on the 17. But just to go really quickly for the federal COVID relief funds, we had the CARES Act in May of 2020, CRSA in December of 2020, the American Recovery Plan in December of 21. Within each of those, we're funding for K-12 public schools or elementary and secondary emergency relief funding. Those are broken out there: 11.9 million from CARES or ESSER 1, 46.6 in ESSER 2, and 104.6 in ESSER 3 in the expiration dates of September of 22, 23, and 24. And so within those, we have a large pot of funding, which has the most flexibility for school districts to do with it what they find in the strategic best interest to get the learning loss accelerated and other needs. So we have those broken out as the K-12 emergency relief. The other allocations are very targeted and restricted to purposes that are predetermined by the state or federal government. And so these here, we won't dwell on this. This is just our allocations, our year-to-date expenditures as of May 13th, and our remaining balance. You'll see that as these funds are expiring in September of 2022, we only have 8% of those remaining as we're trying to fully expend those in advance of that deadline 4 months from now. For the CRSA and ARP appropriations, those total currently 156 or 159,000. We had already spent some in the previous fiscal year, so we have 156 million, not thousand, million budgeted. Of that $156.8 million budgeted, 151.2 of that is in the emergency education relief that has the greatest flexibility on the use. The other ones are, as you can see on the slight program descriptions there, have very targeted purposes. And so We have right now about 50% remaining of our SRSA or our ESSER 2 funding. We have about 70, those expire in September of 2023. We have about 72% remaining on our ESSER 3 from the American Recovery Plan Act. And then when we drill down into the $151.2 million of funding, where we truly have a lot of flexibility in determining how we will use those funds, we have about $55 million allocated, or about 37%, in academic services. The biggest component of that is summer learning that we had in the summer of 21, that we'll have this summer, and again in the summer of 2023. We also have about $21.5 million in temporary two-year positions for our schools, that if Dr. Hardy were here, our Chief Academic Officer, could highlight all of the process they use to determine those positions by the schools. We have about $7.1 million for our district-wide and itinerant staff supporting the schools, digital teaching and learning coaches, media tech, behavioral support, literacy integration, a lot of these needs that in an ideal environment would have been there all along from the state, but we didn't have any support for those. So this is just a high level. We can provide more details of where that 55, those are the largest components of the $55.4 million that we're getting, that we've allocated towards academic services. In operational services, it's $52.7 million, or 35% of the total. The bulk of that is in facility repairs and improvements, primarily around heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. We have money for education technology and pivoting to a one-to-one initiative for student-to-devices, and the refresh and the infrastructure and all the support to make sure that works. We have $6 million for enhanced school cleaning, especially in high-touch surfaces and additional custodial support. We have about $2 million in transportation as sort of support for our summer learning and other additional transportation needs we're incurring, and about 1.4 for child nutrition. As the service has changed slightly because of COVID, and we want to make sure we have adequate funding to support that, especially if our enterprise funds don't come through to support those programs. We have staff recruitment and retention, as you all are experiencing the same thing on our vacancies, recruitment and retention. We issued a $1,500 bonus in the fall, another $1,500 bonus in March, and a third one will be issued in October of 2022. We have recruitment bonuses for our teachers and for our classified staff. We have some other money set aside for TA to teacher pipeline and other pieces of strategies like that to build our own workforce. For school-level strategies, those are funds that the school principals and their assistant superintendents are looking at, and how, with that on-the-ground knowledge, does the principal think is going to best move that school forward, and they present proposals, and those are reviewed and then allocated to those schools for those purposes. We also have administrative costs, some contingency for before and after school care, and for our COVID-19 team of contact tracers and communications. So those are the largest two other pieces. Administrative services is much smaller, and that's in part captured within the HR workforce development is the largest component there. But just very quick high-level overview of those $151.2 million of the funding that we really have the flexibility to define how it's spent.
So in addition to that, I think we've been spending bulk of our funds every summer, around $10 million. Last year, we served about 8,000 students. This year, we're anticipating serving about 6,000 students. Our teachers, they're getting about $40 an hour for them to be interested to come to the program. In the past, we paid them about $25 per hour. A lot of districts, including WIC, they were not able to do summer programming last year because these teachers were burned up and they were not interested. I think the rewards that we're able to put in place about $40 an hour, and then all our classified employees, they're getting additional $5 per hour to be able to work during the summer. So we have a package about $10 million this summer, next summer as well. So a lot of learning loss, and I think we are pretty much recovering, and I think this fund is going to help a lot. That's pretty much conclude our presentation today.
Can we get a copy of this?
It was sent to you. Yes, we emailed it to you all. Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other questions?
Just real quickly, I wanted to say thank you also for the work you're doing on redistricting right now. I know you're, I think, reporting on that tonight, and I know that's such a hot topic and something that needs to be done, and it's difficult, and just thank you on on top of all the, pandemic recovery work you're doing that as well.
I did have one. I had one final follow-up. I hear the 10 million that you set aside. I actually know some teachers that did benefit from that last summer, so I can appreciate, making sure that we have classes available and that teachers are fairly compensated for it. But you ended it by saying that it might aid in combating learning loss. I know that the teachers in Durham Public Schools get the kids as they are, right? When they come into the classroom, some of them hungry, some of them tired, some of them are abused. Not all of them. Some of them are misjudged. Some of them, it's a litany of issues. You know what the numbers are that came out during we can sit here and talk about the emails that we're getting from our teachers, but you know the numbers that came out during the campaign. And you're right, we're improving, but it's not great, especially for kids that look like me and you, Dr. Mubinga. And my just very frank question is, do we think these investments in funding are really going to be what combats learning loss? And if not, how do we work together to do that? Because some people's nightmare is not being elected again. That's not my nightmare. My nightmare is a generation of children not being on a firm foundation. That is my nightmare. It is. I'm not saying that that's where we are. That is not me talking about teachers. I know it'll be misconstrued later on that I am. My sister's teaching Durham Public Schools, so that's not what I'm talking about. But we did have a tremendous amount of learning loss. You all came to us and we talked about mental health. You came to us and said you needed nurses. You came and you said you needed social workers. You've come and you said we needed funding. So we're shooting every shot we have in our arsenal. I'm struggling to be able to tell parents if it's going to work or not, because I think even they know that this is not a fiscal issue. So before you leave today, if some semblance of hope, like, is this really going to help us in combating learning loss when our children are actually struggling a whole bunch, like our teachers?
Thank you, Commissioner Burns. I'm positive we have enough funding to address learning loss. We've shown it, 2019. When I came in, we had 10 F schools. We got it to 1 in a year.
That's right.
We exceeded growth more than state average, more than Wake County. We had all the press here that was like, whoa, what happened? So we're moving forward. Looking at our benchmark where we are today, if all those benchmarks, they're going to correlate with all the EOGs and the EOCs, it's really promising. I was anticipating it was going to take us about 3 years to recover from the pandemic, but our teachers are working really hard and our administrators are working really hard. So in a matter of a year or two, we should be able to start closing those gaps. I'm optimistic. I said this before. I will come back to this board and present you the result as we are really recovering, because when you're funding us, you have to hold us accountable. I'm concerned when I look at students that look like me, when I look at that gap. That's the reason why I came here, to close the gap. I did it in Franklin County. I did it when I came here first year, pandemic, kind of delayed a little bit, but we're going to go back up again. So we'll come back to you with our results because you are funding us.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We appreciate the hard work that you do. And teachers and classifieds, we know it's hard work. So thank you. All right. So we've got another group, Durham Tech. You'll come on up. It's great to see you. Good afternoon.
That helps. Green and red, that's such a complicated system. Thank you. We'll talk a little bit about use of Article 46, some of the trends with those sales tax funds and promise and other uses, a little bit about bulls this year, and then as we look to scale out, our CFO, Andy Kleitch, will talk about Article 46. Our CAO, Kara Battle, will talk about some bulls, and then a little bit of conversation on the CIP, including it and especially related to the HVAC retrofit that the managers put in the recommended budget, and a little bit of a reminder on some of the bond projects if you want to talk any more detail about those. And then obviously any questions, Madam Chair, that you all have. So a quick reminder, we had a number, in addition to kind of our general ongoing operating support, number of requests that we had for you from back to work, bulls, 911 is new. But as I show this to you, I'd be remiss if I didn't say something about the current year, where building on the history of promise funding that you all have done with Durham Tech and other operational funds, you have invested in us and really in our students these scholarships for back to work and bulls that we have been putting to good use, and we greatly appreciate the opportunity to provide new supports for prospective students and new students to move into kind of the emerging jobs and opportunities in this economy. So just a recognition of the support that the recommended budget builds on and that we feel very thankful to have from you all. I would note on this budget a couple of things. One, we ran out of back-to-work scholarships this year and looked for ways to supplement that with some other funding, including looking at ways we might move around some of our existing dollars, and CFO Kleitch can talk a little bit more about that. Our bull stipends we will use, and Dr. Battle will talk about that, and so we feel very good about the demand that is there going into next year and the need that we have. Pleased to report that on the 911 Academy, we're investing $100,000 of our funds to launch that academy, institutional resources. What we're asking here is $9,000 a year for each of the next 3 years, is to be able to bring on new software support that can train existing and new workers on kind of the emerging software that text and video embedded that 911 systems will use. And I'm pleased to report that the Orange County manager has included this in her recommended budget, and City Manager Page has included this in her recommended budget. So both of our counties and the city are in this game, and we appreciate that. We had a couple others, replacement vehicles that we need. As you can see from the cost, those are not new vehicles but used vehicles, and we would be happy to continue to provide any information about that need, as well as a facilities technician as we look to expand services at Durham Tech and facilities. That becomes a critical need. We're just not up to industry standard there, and we're looking for I think it's an 80-20 split with Orange County on that position, and happy to talk about that. And then finally, just to remind you that there are 4 positions, 2 success coaches, one that relates directly to our Bulls program and our back to work and really adult learners coming back to Durham Tech, one with a small business center coordinator. We're trying to deepen our small business center supports. And then finally, a new position, an apprenticeship coordinator, so we can support apprenticeships across the whole of the college and not have different departments have to kind of have their own adventure in developing these, but we can support them in our work with industry. Those are 4 positions that we are going to use our HERF money, that's kind of our version of ARPA, to support in the next year. But as that money runs out, we'll want to come back and talk to you about some ongoing support to make sure we can resource those. So that's a quick reminder about our overarching request, and then want to talk about these 3 specific areas that were suggested we touch on. First being Article 46 funding, including some of the historical, as well as given some availability that is there right now, especially with enrollments coming out of the pandemic, some other uses that we thought we'd discuss with you just as a discussion point. So if I can turn it to CFO Kleitch, I'll do that.
Good afternoon. First, I want to say thank you to the county commissioners and to the residents providing us this Article 46 funding. I think we've put this to a very, very good use since we've been getting the funds. We have been spending the funds for our promise grants, also additional student support in the way of work study positions at the college. Just to sort of give you just an idea, we get about $131,000 each year for federal work study. We've been using close to $250,000 additional to that out of the Article 46 money to provide work study jobs for students on campus. We also provide college liaisons in our high schools in Durham County who work with the students in high schools, work with the counselors in the high schools, get them interested in coming to Durham Tech as a first choice. We also use the funding for our Gateway to College program, which works mostly with students who are coming back to either get a high school degree or to take their equivalency exam, and working with them. Right now, projected at the end of this year, we're going to have about $300,000 in our fund balance for this program. In addition to what's projected a little over 300.
I'm twirling my pen. I'm sorry.
That's right.
I'm not raising my hand. I'll put my hands down. I am so sorry, sir.
That's all right. And about $300,000 additional funding this year out of the Article 46 money. We're looking at a couple things that we'd like to do with this money. One, our state funding for our Adult Basic Skills program is dropping about $300,000 next year. In order for us to keep the program where it is, we would like to increase the amount of money that we're giving to Gateway to College to help cover that shortfall. The last thing we want, I mean, these are the people in the county who really are behind educationally wise, and this would, if we cut the program, that's going to hurt them a lot. Also, to remind you that we're funded a year behind. So our FTE this year is what we're being funded on next year. We found out during COVID that a lot of the students who would come to these programs did not have the technology for online classes. So we hope that going forward this will go up, but we feel like this is really important to be able to keep our adult high school, our adult basic skill program where it is. The next item we had thought about is we all know that there's a big need in the community for nurse aid. Nurse aid is a non-credit program, so we cannot use the promise grants to fund those students. But we'd like to set up scholarships for the nurse aid students so that more of them would be able to have an easier time paying for their courses. As President Buxton said earlier, that our back to work scholarships, we've expended all those funds already this year. And so what we'd like to be able to do is when we go over the $250,000 that's in the budget request, that we can use some of the Article 46 money to continue providing the scholarships for the remainder of next fiscal year. Any questions? Yes.
Thank you. I really appreciate you all, reevaluating and responding to what you see the needs are on the ground in the community and with students. Could you repeat, you said that there was $300,000 worth of decline in state funding for which program?
The Adult Basic Skills program, which basically handles student literacy programs, works for students who have not completed high school, who want to come back and get their high school degree, and then also for students who are just interested in getting their high school equivalency through the exam. We offer courses that prepare them to take these exams, and that's the money that's being cut by the state because of the fact that our FTE has gone down this year. Our funding for next year will go down.
Okay, so that's based on some formula that they use.
Correct.
Okay.
That's not the state cutting it as a line item, that's enrollment based, so that'll drop.
Okay,
That
so
comes
it's-
back, and we believe that as the
Okay.
in-person opportunities available, more
Right.
of these students will come back. We'll
Right.
be operating off a lower.
They're not doing hold harmless.
Right.
Okay. And do you have the data for the actual back to work program? I didn't see that in what you had given us about how many, I know we got information about the bowls, but how many students are participating and successfully completing that? You don't have to give it now, but if you don't have
We
it.
can get that for you.
Okay.
I know it's close to 200 students have been able to be funded through those scholarships. Maybe even more than that now as we get down toward the end of the fiscal year, because we're still funding more scholarships. We're actually using some of our HERF money this year to fund the scholarships now. We have gone over the $250,000 that was appropriated last year for this fiscal year. So we're not, cutting off. It's really important to us not to cut off the spending. We do have the HERF money that we can use, so we're going to continue to provide scholarships for these back-to-work students.
Thank you.
I am not twirling my finger this time. Y'all didn't, every time I did this, he stopped, so I apologize. I'm trying to hold my hands down, but I applaud you along with Commissioner Jacobs about how you all have been proactive and creative on how you use Article 46 funding. Mine is more just of a process question. So but I guess more so you, I always knew about some of the other funding sources for it. So if you in this chart, it says other possible uses. So you all can kind of sort of make decisions maybe annually about how you might want. Don't worry, I'm not about to ask you to use it for anything.
Oh, well,
But you can make that decision on a community college level about how you use it.
Right now, the way the Article 46 allocation is set up, we would be able to use it for the three items that we're currently using it for. So we could fund the Gateway to College program, but the scholarships for the nurse aid program and additional funding for back to work, that would require approval of the commissioners to change the language to that funding.
Okay, that's perfect. And then my only other one, I know we have a partnership with you all for child care. Is there any, why are you smiling, JB? With President Buxton, is there anything additional before are you all gonna mention that in this presentation? Okay, I'm a hush then, there we go, that was me.
I'm smiling because you beat me to the punch. And in fact, you reminded me of something I forgot to say at the top. We asked you for a number of items, which we detailed up top. One of the things we did not ask you for in our budget, but we see as part of a key support for us, is the investment in Kate's Corner. And so we've been able to offer the free on-site childcare at Durham Tech. Our Student Government Association president talked about it in her speech last night at commencement, the importance of being at a place that invests in its students by providing childcare, and how fortunate students should feel that the institution and the community is doing that. So we are very supportive of any opportunity to continue to work with Kate's Corner. I really appreciate, Commissioner, you're bringing that back up. And any opportunities we have to partner with them and with you all to continue offering.
Commissioners, let them get through, because I'm sure they're going to answer in their presentation some of the questions that we may have. So if we could, let's let them get through their presentation and then ask questions. That works.
Sure, Madam Chair. Okay.
Go ahead and go through your
One last thing I'll mention, and then ask Dr. Battle to make some comments about bulls. The only other possible use here that we'd be interested in having a continuing conversation with you and staff is whether we could think about opportunities for our current high school students taking courses with us through dual enrollment that we might almost forward fund that to make sure that we don't have any students for whom books or certain fees become an impediment, and so that we have a clear, equitable opportunity for our dual enrollment courses. We haven't announced this yet publicly, and I'm not going to reveal the name, but we've got a substantial donation from a donor, and some of which is going to be able to be used to do exactly that. So some private funding that we can make available to DPS students to make sure they can take advantage of dual enrollment. It may be that we could look at some public funding as part of Promise that could do that, but as CFO Kleitch mentioned, we'd need some change in language, and that would be a conversation we'd like to continue with your staff and think through. All right, Dr. Battle.
Good afternoon, Commissioners and County Manager. I'm going to provide an update about our BULLS cohort 1 and 2. So as you remember, BULLS stands for Building Up Local Labor Systems. We, with the partnership with Made in Durham, had a pilot in December of last year. We have now started with cohort 1. As you see in this slide, we started that on May 6th, and this is for students ages 18 to 25 who are considered opportunity youth, so they're neither working nor enrolled in school. And it includes a suite of courses. The first course is a good manufacturing practice and standard operating procedures course, a bio work course, and then a certification exam prep course. And so we have 9 students in the first cohort that will end in September when they complete those 3 suite of courses, and the second cohort will start on June 24th. And right now we are in the application process for that, but we have 16 applicants and are on target to meet our goal of 25 students for the funding that you provided. If we switch to the next slide, so this is how we see scaling up this BULLS initiative. So BULLS, Building Up Local Labor Systems, Life Sciences, currently will serve 25 students this summer, and we hope to increase that anywhere from 60 to 100 students in the future. And that would require the $625,000 to $850,000. But that would include the life stipends that we provide to each of the students, maximum $10,000. It would include instructional costs for faculty, and it would also include the career success coach that is part of that mentoring and helping students be successful. As we think about BULLS and other sectors that we'd like to build out, construction trades is another one that is primed to have a lot of candidates. So we are able to accommodate 20 students per year. We have welding and HVAC, and that would be at a cost of $200,000. And it would also cover PPE costs. There are increased PPE costs for the welding students, the life stipends, the instructors, and other costs. And then a future build out we see as information technology. So we are in the process of developing our infrastructure, making sure that the courses and certifications that we offer match what the industry needs are. So we are reframing and re-engaging in that work, but hope with 2023-24 launch and have some support in the IT sectors also. Any questions about BULLS?
So one thing I'd add to Dr. Battle's commentary here is where you have put together an ARPA framework and have some resources for workforce development and BULLS specifically. These are where some of these resources would get invested. And as we look to scale, this would, over the next 2 years, essentially fund this kind of process. Now, that will only take us out 2 years, but that's what you would see with those resources. We have other areas that we see moving in this direction with cohorts, things like advanced manufacturing that we think is ripe for this. We're just not at a place right now to implement that as we look to kind of rebuild the work we've done in mechatronics and advanced manufacturing, and I think it's kind of in that area. But I just wanted to note that this is responsive to that ARPA money. Let me get a little closer. There we go. All right. Last area is just a reminder of the CIP work, and really want to focus in on the retrofac of HVAC. I'm going to pitch that over to CFO Kleitch here in a second. That's in the first year of the CIP. But let me just remind you that we had these three priorities with our 10-year CIP, with a couple new facilities that we think are critical for in-demand jobs and where we don't have the facilities and resources to address as the industry needs. This retrofac of our HVAC systems, which COVID really highlighted the importance of acting on this. We did some near-term fixes, but we really need this overall retrofit. And then finally, property acquisition along Bacon and Cooper, so the county and the college can be in firm control of the campus. I just remind you on life science, before we get into the HVAC retrofit, we did an event on RTP Bio with Congressman Price the other day, and between the time I spoke and the Biotech Center representative came up, we had increased about 1,000 jobs. I'd said 6,000 jobs over the last 2 years. She corrected me. It's 7,000 jobs in this region over the last 2 years, 50% of which are based in Durham. But obviously, we want Durham residents to have opportunity in all these jobs. We've co-designed this with 4 biotech companies, which are really representative. This would allow us to do customized training for their incumbent workers, continuing education opportunities for residents, and curriculum, associate and applied science and biotech as an example. And we really need these facilities and have some commitments from them to support that build-out. The Allied Health Facility, which is currently in the CIP package, I just wanted to update you. Last time I talked about continuing conversations with Duke. We had another meeting yesterday where we learned that in the areas we're really focusing in with them, for instance, nurses, they're seeing, and I'm going to make sure I give you the right numbers here. It's on this page. In years 1 through 3, 50% turnover in nurses. In nurse aid, 40% in nurse aid, 51%, surgical technologists, 72%, in an area we've talked about, continuing education, central sterile processing, 71%. I mean, they are just significant workforce challenges in this industry, and if you look at the 30 occupations that we see across these 2 tertiary hospital systems, they are all projected to grow at significant rates. We just don't have a facility to do that kind of teaching and learning and to expand our production, and so allied healthcare. And then finally, just a reminder that I don't know what that color is. It's like pink or purple or something like that. But those are the areas we're looking for some property acquisition opportunities to have the integrity of the campus in place, and we've appreciated your partnership on that front. And then finally, Andy, you want to talk through this?
Yes, in this year's portion of the CIP, there's $1.1 million for our retrofit of HVAC and other climate control systems. I just wanted to give you an idea of the 4 projects that we would be able to undertake this year. First, I want to remind you that all these buildings are 20 years old or older. So the equipment in it have not been replaced and is getting down to where we're having continuing problems. So the first thing we want to do is we want to replace the chiller in Building 1 at the Northern Durham campus, replace the chiller in main campus, Building 5, which is the building that includes the library, then replace a boiler in Building 2 at the Northern Durham campus, and then replace a boiler in the main campus in Building 2, which is the Collins building. So these are the projects that we would be able to undertake with that $1.1 million that is in this year's CIP request.
And your team, it's been such a pleasure to serve on your board and hear all the incredible things that is happening at Durham Tech, and it's exciting. One of the things that I didn't hear you talk about is the collaboration between Wake Tech and Durham Tech that I'm just really thrilled about. Could you share a little bit more about that with the board?
I would, and I'd want to turn to my colleague who's really led this work with her colleagues at Wake Tech. Talk a little bit about it.
So, yes, we have a great partnership with Wake Tech Community College. So traditionally, community colleges have a service area in counties that they are assigned to, and we are very strict about not crossing those lines. And we've developed a really great partnership and collaboration with Wake Tech in terms of our life science courses and the programs that we offer, the programs that they offer. So building on the strengths that we have, the strengths that they have, and letting our students walk between the two colleges without any barriers. And so a student can start a program at Wake Tech and finish it at Durham Tech for areas such as clinical trials research that Wake Tech does not have, or we don't currently have an associate in applied science and biotechnology. So a student could start their coursework at Durham Tech and then finish the degree at Wake Tech. So it includes the coursework, but it also includes the partnership with industry partners so that they don't have to think, okay, which college do I need to reach out to in order to get what their needs are to develop their talent pipeline. They can reach out to RTP Bio or to either one of us, and we will both collectively work with them. Initially, this partnership has been between Wake Tech, but other colleges have expressed interest in why weren't they at the table for this. So it may get bigger as we scale this up in the future. But we have been working very closely. It's processes that we've been designing for over a year, and we just announced it a few weeks ago.
Thank you. Awesome.
Madam Chair, if I could just add that it's also going to allow us to get some economies of scale and join forces around awareness about life science opportunities for middle and high school students, as well as our apprenticeships, and make sure our companies, we can kind of work across the park together. The last thing is, you were there for the announcement, but thanks to Congressman Price's leadership, we have a $1.2 million community project that will support our institutions to do all the work, including some faculty support and recruitment that we need to do in this area. So we're pleased that we're going to have some resources to get this train out the station.
I'm pleased that I can stop saying stuff that I should be saying. So I don't have to say those things anymore. Commissioners, questions? Start with Commissioner Carter.
Yes, thank you for your presentation and all this information. Congratulations on another year of graduates from Durham Tech last night. It's awesome. And I just continue to be very excited and want to thank you for the wonderful strategic planning that you're doing with the capital planning, but also in the academics area, and work that you're doing to really make our workforce development pipeline between high schools and Durham Tech and industry, the high-demand industries, more robust. It's really, it seems very exciting. It really seems very solid what you're doing. I'm wondering a few questions. One is, could you tell us a little bit about your commitment to sustainability or carbon reduction in your capital improvement planning or your retrofit planning?
It's actually something, Commissioner Carter, that we put in our 5-year strategic plan, is our carbon footprint. We don't have specific goals attached to that yet, and really we've put that in the second year of a 5-year plan to do the startup. I'm happy to say that President Price over at Duke, with their pretty robust action on climate, has agreed to share all of their resources, whether they're related to their fiscal plan, or to some of their curriculum resources with us, so we can do that. So as we do our planning moving forward about how we're going to build these buildings or how we're thinking about the HVAC retrofit, and in fact, we did some fixes to our HVAC this year that had a nod towards sustainability in terms of what product we chose. And you're going to have to remind me, it was like something bionic.
It's ionic processing, and what it does, it installed in the ductwork in all our buildings, and what this did was it helped purify the air. It was one of the things we were able to do with our HERP funds to basically reduce the amount of possible COVID virus that was going through our systems, and we installed those in all the campuses, and that's one thing that we have we've done so far. And as President Buxton said, as we go forward in designing our new buildings, and also as we work on these retrofit projects, we are going to take into account our carbon footprint and look at ways that we can reduce it as we do those projects.
So we're committed to work with your staff moving forward, and as we bring our architects and builders in on that front.
Have to invest more funding in order to get where we want to be with carbon decarbonization and sustainability. It doesn't last if you're focused on that or go specific goals in years. I also wanted to know if you all have plans or thoughts around dual enrollment maybe in this allied healthcare track, and any middle college, high school, maybe potential connections, and especially in the allied health. We're talking about these massive programs that are university healthcare and medical systems.
So let me say one word about some of our plans, and then Dr. Badoff, any comments about how we're rethinking some of the high school certifications. We were fortunate to receive some funding from the A.J. Fletcher Foundation to bring in RTI. RTI has been working with us to work with DPS first, and then we're going to go over to our Orange County school districts, but we have this kind of most robust relationship with DPS about a framework for dual enrollment that's a little more intentional about how students can move into our courses, but more importantly, into our pathways. So students aren't just taking courses randomly or that just to grab some college credit, but thinking about ways they can get directly into one of our 7 pathways, because we have very clear ways for them to plug in and move, including getting students to think about courses that are prereqs for any of our pathways. So if they're going to be enrolled in a degree program, they can do those during their high school years and then begin building directly into what they need for certain certifications or degrees. So that has gone very well in terms of building out that framework in these different areas, so we can, I think, better focus high school students on where they are trying to head when they're taking these courses. Allied health is an area where we've had some high school certifications, but not had great take-up in there, so we're kind of rethinking that now, and you might want to make some comments.
Yes, so we are reframing and looking at our allied health dual enrollment pathways to make sure that they're meeting the needs of our industry partners, and that they are more intentional. So as President Buxton mentioned, we've had pathways in the past, but students have not completed them or gone on to complete the degree. So we want to be more intentional and make sure that we are clear about the coursework and that they're able to take those courses prior to transitioning from high school.
And just thinking back about to the BOLS initiative slide that you had, are you saying that that you're going to be using your equivalent of ARPA funding initially to expand to that?
We would look to use the ARPA funding that you all have identified in the framework if that's what ends up
That's right.
passing.
Okay, and then in the end, we'll need to pick up from it.
And then the question moving forward, we can certainly continue to teach courses and where we have scholarship resources that we can position for non-credit coursework. We're going to also develop a credit pathway or a curriculum pathway, this Associate's Applied Science in Biotech. But the stipend will be the big question moving forward, how we accomplish that. But, yeah.
And this year, how many students are there? There's 9 in the first cohort. How many in the second?
We will have served 30 at the end of, by the time we finish with the second cohort in September. 5 in the pilot, 25 during cohort 1 and 2.
Is it going well so far?
It is going well. Yes, the pilot, we learned a lot from the pilot that we made changes with our first cohort. So it is going very well, yes.
And it's about $10,000 a student.
Yes, yes.
Which is really an interesting thing to know. I mean, I'm sure it costs that at least, right? And so when we think about per pupil funding, necessarily a large amount, right? But it's doing a lot right now. We're doing a lot with it. It's needed.
It is, and it's removing a lot of the barriers that are typically in place that prevent students from continuing with their education. We're able to, and they can use the money however they see fit. We don't determine how they spend it. We work with developing a budget with them and how they can allot the money, and we give it out every 2 weeks in disbursements based on in metrics that they've met.
If I could, because that number, I think for a lot of people, it's a big number. But to me, it's like an apprenticeship specifically focused on opportunity youth. And so where we got this great electrical apprenticeship that we run, that's what Vice President Harris came and visited, where folks are working 40 hours a week and then doing training on the weekends, about 270 hours during the year. They're getting paid, and they're able to support their families and themselves. For these students who need to support themselves or their families, a $10,000 stipend over the time it takes for them to go through the BOLS program is just the cost of living they would be otherwise supporting. So we're allowing them, individuals who've really been disconnected from education and employment, the opportunity to focus squarely on the training they need to get into the job and not have all these other variables interfere. And if we want this cohort of 18 to 24-year-olds to move through, we feel research is really clear about what we've got to make available and what obstacles we clear out, and that's what it's able to do. And so it's supporting, for a lot of students, just basic needs and housing and childcare and the things that life is presenting, but it's allowing them to focus on good manufacturing practices and biowork and the things they need to go to these companies. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Is there any chance of losing Article 46 taxes? Would there be any, that revenue, is there any chance of losing that?
Do you mean the permission from the state for the county to use in that way? Not that I'm aware of, but I don't want to make any predictions when it comes to the General Assembly.
Gotcha. Keith, were you getting ready to say something?
No, there's no, only the state can take away.
They can take away anything they want.
You all have the ability to dictate what that are. So, you in theory as board members can say we're no longer giving them more to educate. You all have that. It would be stunning if the state took away the state legislation. There's a whole bunch of that vote for people that law.
Okay. Commissioner Jacobs?
Thank you. Thank you for all the great work that you're doing. I have a few follow-up questions, some things that Commissioner Carter also raised. I love the fact that we were able to transition the original meaning of the BOLS initiative to a different meaning of the BOLS initiative. That worked really well.
Well, it was very sneaky. I feel like I just figured it out.
So, and I wondering about the and I totally support our using the ARPA funding for building out the capacity. And that slide that you showed us, Dr. Battle, I would love to see that fleshed out with a timeline and kind of which year, how many more students can we get in and which funding would need it for each stage, and just kind of even projecting that out for the next few years, because I'm wondering, I would like to hear more about the engagement of the employers with the BOLS initiative, with the Allied Health Program, with the Life Science Training Center, because, a lot of companies, they're doing hiring bonuses now, things like that. We're all doing that. Would they be willing to fund the $10,000 stipend, knowing that they're going to get an employee coming down the road? So, Duke is having these huge turnovers. How are they going to put skin in the game with, the Allied Health Program, again, related to things like apprenticeship stipends? Because at the end of the day, that is what is going to be the barrier, even when you talked about the dual enrollment for Durham Public School students. We have so many Durham Public School students that work, right? They've got jobs at night, after school, on the weekends. Well, what if they could instead get paid to be in one of these career tracks for construction or for the allied health? And that's where they're getting the money to help support their families. And they're going to be getting a good paying job on the end of it. So I know you are doing more than anybody has ever done to build relationships with our employers. And I really support those positions that are very focused on building those relationships, right? The apprenticeship coordinator, but just wondering, just throwing some of those things out, and just want to hear your thoughts.
Sure. Well, first, we work very closely with Made in Durham on BOLS program, and we have a very detailed spreadsheet that I think Dr. Battle could speak more eloquently to than I can, that has costs built out over a number of years and what it will take to scale up. We've also had conversations about how we're going to do employer engagement, front end and back end, but get these companies involved midstream in BOLS so that our students and companies are building some relationships while they're going through the program, and then some of these guaranteed interview and guaranteed hire opportunities. Made in Durham has been taking the step largely of thinking about mentors within some of these companies who almost take the warm handoff of the student from us to them as they come into a new employment situation. I do think moving forward, between the county's interests, the employer's interests, and our institutional, potentially some donor interests in supporting stipends, there's a way to build out kind of a public-private partnership, institutional, individual, that could carry the day moving forward, and we'll certainly be ready to have those kind of conversations. We're aware that this is probably not a 50-year model of funding stipends, but we think it's going to be the proof that we need to then take it to our employers and to potentially some individual or philanthropic. And the last thing I'll say is, these life science companies, as we talk to them, are I want to choose my words carefully. Now I'm living in your world. I would say increasingly cognizant of just how much competition is around them, and thinking about how they stand out and how they guarantee access to this great talent we're going to have coming out of our programs. And they're thinking out loud about not just guaranteed interview, but guaranteed hire. And so I think we have a great opportunity to build on that.
Okay, well, great. And then two other questions. One is, I wanted to hear more about how the Northern Durham Tech campus is being used now, and then plans for the future. If you all are tied in at all to this Way to Go Durham mobility on-demand van shuttle program that has just been weighed out. And then on the transportation question, how connected you've been to some of the regional transportation conversations, because, for instance, the plans for commuter rail actually could connect Durham Tech and Wake Tech, which, if that happens, then that could be another, how do we tie in students being able to go back and forth, or if it's not commuter rail, then bus rapid transit, but just the transportation piece. And then, and also, I totally support the fact that we offer free childcare. That is critical, especially with the addressing the barriers, right? And then my other question is, if the breakdown between Orange County and Durham County is that 73% of the students are from Durham, 27% are from Orange County. When I looked at that slide for instance, the apprenticeship coordinator, seeing that only 10% of the funding is coming from Orange County, just wondering, how do we do those cost shares?
What number? I'm sorry.
Go back to the apprenticeship slide.
No, but the 7327.
Okay, there was a slide there that had the positions. It's in the budget book.
Because
okay, it's in our budget book then, that it says on our budget book that Durham Tech 73% of students come from Durham and 27% from Orange County. Is that not accurate?
Yeah, our Orange County numbers are more like, and we can get these exact, 16 to 17%, I think, are Orange
Okay.
County residents right now.
Okay, 16 to 17%. Okay, but still, just wondering how you all figure out the cost share for some of the programs and the positions that fund both? Because I noticed the apprenticeship position was 10% Orange, 90% Durham.
Right.
So just wondering how that is approached. That's my second.
Got it. So let me start with the transportation and say first, I feel like every other week I have a transportation conversation with a regional planner or someone about whether it's commuter rail or bus rapid transit, or so we are very plugged in, and Go Triangle has been very good at reaching out to us and thinking through needs. I will tell you what we tell them consistently, which is we really need, for our students getting access, we need cross-town routes, we need shorter headways, we need access to northern Durham, and it doesn't have to be a bus, but way to go, and the van pools may solve that. At northern Durham, we have largely, and Dr. Bell, you might want to talk about some of the specific programs out there, we have largely put programs where we know students can get there by car because of what has been unreliable, no opportunity for public transportation. And so we've tried to move programs to main campus or Duke Street North or American Tobacco where there's more public transportation and our students rely on it. So that ends up being mostly human services and public safety. Well, why don't you list some of those?
So we moved our biotech program from our Northern Durham Center, where we're in the process of moving it. It has been a renovation adventure for the summer to main campus. But so now our Northern Durham Center is primarily human services and public safety programs. So a lot of our sheriff's training, our 911 center will be there, correction officers, detention officer training, all of that, police officer training is at our Northern Durham campus. So it's mainly a human services and public service campus.
Little bit of EMS, little bit of
Yes.
electric line technician. So bottom line, yes, it would be nice if way to go, improve that. I think microtrans is probably important out there. We do foresee doing some customized training out there with Trayburn. But to the extent that it needs equipment, it'll be here, main campus in Durham.
So just to follow up on that, has Way to Go Durham reached out to you all to try to market what they provide to the Durham Tech students? Has that happened yet?
I'm looking at Andy to see if they've reached out to him.
Okay.
If they have, it is possible. We have one other individual who stays focused on our transit from a student perspective. They may have reached out to her, and I can check, but I'm not aware of that.
So I would just say to the county manager, we have spent years trying to get this going, and now we're funding it, and the city is supposed to be providing this service. So I think we need to follow up, and that's what it's supposed to help students or anybody get out to the Northern Durham Tech campus and to Trayburn. So we need to make sure that collaboration is happening.
We're going to add it on our agenda conversation to have a meeting.
Great.
Yeah, okay.
I would note that on your staff, Annie Miracle has been quite persistent in trying to identify our transportation needs out there.
Yeah.
So we've appreciated that. Cost share.
And I know we've had a conversation with Mert about that, and Corny as well. And the city was supposed to follow up on that conversation. I don't know where it is right now.
You want to talk cost share?
Yes, on the cost share, on the apprenticeship program, apprenticeship coordinator, the reason for the 90-10 is talking to our workforce development coordinator. He sees right now that most of the apprenticeship opportunities, because of the companies that are in Durham County, will be more here than in Orange County. So that's why the 90-10. Our normal split between Durham and Orange with like our facility technicians or our housekeepers, is actually 80-20%. And the same with our campus police officers. It's split between 80-20, which is pretty close to the breakdown of students in each of the from the two counties.
Thank you.
Because we're on time, I will be relatively quick. I can follow back up about Kate's Corner later. Excuse me, I don't know what I'm choking on over here. But I did want to say that this morning I did get to see Dr. Battle and I did get to see President Buxton just a little bit at the workforce development retreat that we had at Durham Tech. And I just wanted to highlight two things and then bring a question back and see if the board has an appetite for it. So right now, you know, the gentleman, Jeff Belize actually had a presentation up, and he had a seesaw, and the seesaw said February 2020 and March 2022. And he said unemployment rates and labor rates, and he asked us to guess where were labor rates. I mean, unemployment. Let me not say that. Unemployment rates. Unemployment rates, and this is just specifically for Durham. The whole PowerPoint was for Durham. February 2020, it was 3.1. March 2022, it was 2.9. Now, that might not seem like a big difference, but it is the sixth lowest in the state, and it's the lowest it's been in 22 years. I personally think that it is because of some of the great work that you all have been doing in collaboration with us and the other universities and with initiatives like this. So I'm doing a clap for y'all in my head, and I think that we can knock it down even further. We talk about that 1,000 extra jobs the other day we were there. So there's 7,000 jobs, and we know that 50% of them are here. Now, you touched on it a little bit, Vice Chair Jacobs, and then actually Commissioner Carter brought this up at one point. I'm trying to figure, I wish Andy Miracle was here. As we're looking at the jobs coming in, as we're looking at the work you all are doing, we're talking about public-private partnerships. I want to know what my board's appetite might be for in the incentive package that we use, that, you know, we have those sheets that we go over. I would be curious to see if you all would be interested, this is Durham Tech asking you all, if you all would be interested in having our board add on to that list, hey, would you like to invest in this Bulls initiative, right? Or, hey, would you like to aid in the providing of a stipend? Or, we would be interested in adjusting this percentage if you agree to partner with the Bulls initiatives in your employment process. Because right now, we can't talk about everything that's on there, but right now on that sheet, we'll say you have to do X amount of job fairs. You have to do X amount of extern SIPs or experiential experiences with teachers. And so as we build this out, and I'm a proponent of building it out, I want to make sure that you all, you know, I want it to be 130. Like, I wish we could give y'all a whole lot more. I really seriously do, but we're tightening belts all over the place. So I'll stop there. So I'm asking here, and I'm asking my board, would you all be interested in us adding that as we work towards incentives for companies that come here? And I'm also asking my board, is that something we'd be interested in, especially as we're trying to diversify the support that you all get? So those are my only two questions.
I'm deferring to the chair before or would you like me to go first?
Go ahead. We'll talk about you later, but we'll let you talk now. Then we'll talk about you.
We are interested in anything it supports our students' ability to take these courses and move into these jobs, and we are ready for any of those conversations.
Everything. I got you.
I just respectfully request that my board, if we get the opportunity, can we talk to Andy Merica about adding those in?
Can we talk about it later?
Sure, I'll be quiet. I got to leave anyway.
No, I'm not asking that. I'm just saying, can we have the conversation when it's time for us to have some dialogue? Other questions? Any other board members? Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of your presentation, unless you have something else for us.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity. We appreciate the manager's support in the budget, the recommended budget.
Always good to see you. All right. So this brings us, Commissioners, to the board questions and conversation. Any requests that you have for staff? Now's the time. Commissioner Jacobs?
Yeah, I just wanted to reference, I did send out a bunch of follow-up questions that I did copy all the other commissioners on, mostly because so we don't repeat our questions to the staff and people, you know, I'm sure I asked things that other people were going to ask too. But I did want to highlight two things that I did put in my my questions. One was I had identified, now where are my notes on that? Oh, here it is. I had identified about $900,000 worth of things that are in the general fund that could possibly be used for ARPA funding, and my only criteria was that they were kind of one-time funding things, because you've really gotten that into our heads very well. Good job on that. So I just wanted to highlight that, and then, you know, the other thing that I was looking at was some of the vehicles, because that was just, you know, kind of a big-ticket thing. But the other thing I wanted to highlight was I did make 3 requests for additional budget presentations, because I know after today, I forget which day it is starting, there were some days in our calendar that were kind of open-ended where commissioners could request additional presentations.
Yes.
And first of all, I also wanted to throw that out to hear what other board members wanted to hear about from departments. So I just wanted to open that up to hear what other commissioners may want to hear. And just to say that the 3 departments that I had requested was to hear more from community paramedicine, the new department, community intervention and support services, and third was soil and water. And I did explain what I wanted to hear about, but I also wanted to hear from the rest of our board what other departments you may want to hear from, since we do have that time in our budget work session. So that's what I was just opening it up.
So the staff has got your 3. Those are 3 that you have, Commissioner Jacobs? Okay. So are there other departments, other commissioners?
Just to give you an update, so on June the 2nd, right now, we have General Services, IS&T, the ABC Board, the Sheriff. That's a 9 to 2:30 day on June the 2nd. We have an open one that we can put in one of these 3. And then June the 6th, we have 3 scheduled work sessions left. June the 6th, we have Sewer Utility Fund and the Stormwater Fund. Both of those have rate increases, and we generally talk about fee increases, particularly for the Stormwater Fund.
We do have a budget session on June 6th, so
Yes, ma'am. June the 6th is only 3 hours. I say only. Our time goes by quickly. It's 2 to 5, so there's not a whole lot of room. June the 8th is the last scheduled work session, and it's wide open, so we can, you know, put any number of folks on there. I just wanted to give you an idea. Again, on June the 2nd, General Services, IS&T, ABC Board, and the Sheriff, and then June the 6th was Stormwater and Sewer Utilities. And so we have 3 more that we can try to fit in there. I hear you, community paramedicine, EMS, to talk about that.
So can we put soil and water there?
Soil and water on the 2nd or the 6th?
On the 2nd?
We can try.
Yeah, we can, be general services, we may have some shuffling there. So we'll work with the manager and try to fit them in together. For general services, Mo is out, so I'll be doing the presentation. So beyond our script, we may not have to hold.
Yes. Are there,
And if I can just add, I know the chair had asked about Family Connects Durham, but we put that on a regular session. So that'll serve it the same purpose. We can leave it on the regular session, but I just wanted to note that that was to serve the same purpose to hear for budgeting purposes. We can leave it because it's already on, yes, we can leave it where it is. They'll be prepared.
Any other departments?
I had also said I was interested in soil and water, so just I put a ditto on that one. And this doesn't necessarily have to be by way of a presentation, but just trying to understand the philosophy on vehicle replacement and the schedule for that, and which ones are electric or hybrid, and how that's going to mesh with our new fleet pool pilot and hopefully approach. Yeah, and why it differs. This is just my own, lack of knowledge and understanding. I've always had this question, even on the school board. In my house, we drive a car until it dies. We do not get a new car. And just wondering, because cars start to depreciate as soon as you buy them. And so just, I'm sure that you can't have the same philosophy in a big organization as you can have as a home, as a car owner, but just wondering.
Yeah, no,
It just hurts me to spend money
yeah,
on
we can add, we definitely can add that. I just got rid of a 20-year-old truck, so I understand.
One of the things I've heard over the years is there are some policies around how long those cars are supposed to be in use, so.
we have a general policy of 100,000 miles and/or 10 years. So we have a number of vehicles that are well over 10 years old. We have a number of vehicles that are over 100,000. EMS vehicles and the sheriff's vehicles are also under that policy, although there's a little bit more stringency with those because we can't afford to have 14 sheriff vehicles or ambulances out. Like, we can all work around one family car and grumble for a couple of days or a week. That can't really happen with EMS vehicles. And they're on a schedule, and we usually try to replace sheriff vehicles at either a third or a fourth of the vehicle fleet. There's several hundred sheriff vehicles. There's 10 or 12 ambulances. The ambulances, I'll remind you, you've already bought 22 23s with money this year because of the lag, the amount of time it's taking to get them built and delivered to us. But those vehicles are slightly different than when we talk about general services vehicles or public health vehicles. Those folks usually have vehicles that could be anywhere from 15 years old or 150. We do try to run those in the ground, which is getting us to the point where we're doing the pilot study for a pool of vehicles that people, so they don't sit for too long, that will maximize the use during the lifetime. Any questions?
Please know that we are frugal too. How old is your car? No, I'm just
I drive a 2009
Right.
It's paid for. That's my favorite
So
part.
we have the same philosophy, but a lot of it's the cost benefit of repair costs to vehicle replacement. That's
Right.
a lot of-
We have switched over, just so you know. We used to buy vehicles with bank loans, and we would do it, and we got away from that a couple of managers ago where we started paying cash for them. So we're not paying cash plus interest, because after 4 years, you do a new bank loan, but you've got 4 different bank loans you're paying on. So you're paying interest plus. We haven't done that for a decade plus. We pay with them in cash. It is tempting to say, how can we limit that? And we can look at those things. How can we limit the cost of that? It's expensive. The vast majority of our replacement vehicles in any given year are sheriff and ambulance.
And if I can add one more piece to it, the longer we keep, or the older our fleet is, the more maintenance is needed on that fleet. And our maintenance workforce is not where it needs to be. I was just over at EMS, and we are down to one maintenance person. And he has been coming, he came in on Easter Sunday to work on vehicles. We're down to one person, yes. So that's another reason to keep your fleet.
Historically, we've tried to talk with the city about a combined maintenance. That fell through. That would have to be looked at again if you all brought that up. I don't have a clue why we don't have that. Most of our departments do not have maintenance at all. The sheriff doesn't. The sheriff uses car dealerships or whoever, And the same with other vehicles. I think it's only EMS has maintenance people for exactly the reasons we just discussed, that those vehicles need to be fixed quickly and kept up regularly.
Okay, yeah, mine is relatively quick. I'm laughing at you, Keith. He said we'll run them into the ground at 150. I had a Jeep Cherokee that had 370,000 miles. You don't know how to run a car into the ground like the Burnses and the Carters. So, but I will say I'm with you on. I'm with you. I understand why we have
County vehicles.
The county vehicles, yeah, because the insurance on them also. We can't have them breaking down on the road. So I get the safety issue. The state might not back them up, and so I get some of that. Where I want to pivot back to, I know that with the soil and water, I know that you had identified Betsy in there. I get conflicting information, some good, some bad, so it might be helpful. I'm not trying to prolong our presentations, but what I would like to see, I know that during the budget retreat, Commissioner Carter and I had both asked about the grant funding being increased there. So I remember I got it in the mail. I'm throwing this into the air. It doesn't have to be in the presentation. It would be nice if it was, but we actually got a booklet in the mail that show where each one of those grants went. Like we had some cattle farmers that got like a vacuum zip dryer. Some folks were able to get a machine to help pluck their turkeys. So I had requested additional funding in those grants that we could give out to farmers. And I think the schools also get some. And if I'm not mistaken, when I asked during my budget session with you all, we found that you all had made an increase there. And if we had, I want to know what that policy is, how we can get it out. So if that could be added in there, I only need like 5 minutes. If it doesn't take that, great. Somebody, if they could just send me the booklet again, that'd be perfect. The only other thing I want to add, also, we're talking about, I'm proud of the fact that we, under, this leadership of women, we came up with a new department, our community intervention department, and I don't think it gets highlighted as much. And it might be nice if we could go out and talk about it, but what I would love to see in that, if it's possible, I know that Joanne is not here, whether or not we always agree with the messenger, I can agree that the message is sound. And I really want to know what we are doing for black boys in Durham. And
Black boys.
what we're doing for African American boys, Latino boys, brown boys, or all of our boys, because that's where we're seeing, we saw the percentages that came out the campaign. We see when we look at the crime cabinet, when we saw the gang task force, the gang assessment. So I'm not trying to put additional work, but even if it's much like maternal health, we said we would put an emphasis on it last year, and we came back to do funding this year. I can't sit here for 4 years on this board and we not say, all right, we're at least planning and moving forward. And I know Joanne was in the stages. I would like to know what stage that is in.
Well, I know with My Brother's Keeper,
Right.
with our integration of that into the new department, that was the commitment to the board that we would come back and share how the structure would look going forward. And so,
even if it's just a snippet of where we are, I'm good.
sure.
Commissioner Burns and Commissioner Jacobs both said CISS. You specifically want to hear about African American, Latino
Yeah, where those
males and how they're working. Because I want to make sure when I contact them, I was like, this is what they would like to hear about. Is there a dollar-related issue you would like to hear about in relation to that, or is it just you want to sort of?
I just want to make one clarification point, though, to Commissioner Burns. I do feel that our My Brother's Keeper infrastructure would encompass that.
I agree.
And so that although we may give an update, it may be a little bit later before we can give more information. But again, General Manager Pierce can give more information. But I do believe we have the structure through My Brother's Keeper.
Okay.
And it's just a matter of us fleshing it out.
Is advertising for the new director.
For the director.
Right.
So it's, she's working hard.
So here's what I will say about my request. If in the event, like I said, if it's, because you're right, I'm happy you said dollar amount, because that brought me back to the point that we are in budget. So I might not need an update on this if I'm not requesting a dollar amount. I got that. So
I didn't mean to imply.
No, but no, brother, I heard, listen, you ain't trying to be here on June 8th. No, but this is what I will say. This is what I will say. Within the request
Right.
for the community intervention department, if we could at least have a slide on the ongoing work that has been doing in that place. And then I will go to leadership and the manager later in the year, if that is fair, and say, hey, Joanne, where are we on that?
Right, I think
Is
that,
that where, okay.
yeah, because I just wanted to help manage expectations.
Absolutely.
Because we always have, y'all sometimes are ahead of us. We mean well and we go fast, but sometimes we may not be quite as in sync, but I just wanted to manage that expectation and see if that could happen a little bit later.
And I'm sure she'll be more than happy to bring us a report. And I don't know if I haven't heard her mention anything about it.
They are in process of recruiting for the position. It's just a convergence of a lot. It's exciting because so much is happening right now. And so the next steps will come quickly, but
Never really created a department since I've been here. I don't.
it's been a while since we've merged. The emergency services, we merged, but it's been a while. Yeah.
And if I can add, I actually met with that department all through Bull City United, Project Build, help me with, My Brother's Keeper was, in My Brother's Keeper. I met with every one of those staff members to make sure they understand. We recognize them as a department, and then we talked about their needs and what we are doing to get the directors and to get the positions filled. And so we have a good sense of what their needs are, and I'm glad to know that we are looking at spaces for them because they do need to expand. And so I think we're at a good place. It's just once we get the director position filled, I think you'll be able to see kind of how the structure, it will operate in the manner in which we wanted it to. We just have to get all the.
Outside of director, or resources that we go into the budget.
We are adding an additional administrative
Administrative.
support. They're an office of 20 or plus now. It has no administrative support. That's not feasible for an office that size with the amount of
Right.
paperwork and grants and things that they deal with. So there's a position recommended
Yep.
for administrative support for that office. That is in this budget.
One easy question, one probably not so easy. I'll start with the easy one first. I think it'd be easy anyway. Why did the budget department decrease by 1 FTE?
Because we're team players, that's why.
I just can't imagine.
Man, did you plant that I think, did Keith ask you to ask that question?
you slide that
created a
to
get out
her?
of jail free card. No, look, and I'm going to play later on in my career. No, with the change in management, I want our office to have clear discussions moving forward with the manager and hopefully an upgraded strategic plan, what we're doing around performance measurement and how we can improve that and how we can, but we don't need that position right now as defined. And there are other needs, and we talk about reallocating vacant positions and doing different things with them. The budget office wants to walk that walk a little bit. So again, I don't like giving up positions, but let's give it up and put it to use somewhere else. And when we need something and we're clear, we'll come back to you. You see how I'm setting you up a couple of years from now? I'll remind you that legitimately, that's the reason. That's the reason why.
Admirable answer.
And I will say, I thank Keith for that. And we, through the years, departments y'all have seen have realigned. Sometimes we've did a shakedown and say, hey, we're going to borrow your positions. And I think Keith did that a couple of years ago. We took some from his area of finance. And
Did it with his office.
Right, that's right. And then we restored them. So departments do work with each other, and I think it's just fabulous because I know Dr. Sewell can speak to some of the departments advocating for the administrative side because they see how they're doing their best, but workload-wise, it's just too much. And so I thought it was just fantastic that they did it, but so many other departments also advocated for finance or HR, general service, because they see this increased population coming,
Right.
and it's putting pressure on them, which is putting pressure on the other departments. So we just have a great organization.
Well, thanks, budget team and everyone across the organization who are working like team players. My, my
Kids would say, you're the bomb.
you the bomb. My
Harder question.
My other question, and I'm not even exactly sure how to formulate an intelligent question around this issue, but it's related to the alliance funding. Is there something that we need to do to help ensure that we know more services are needed, and so it's just so painful to see?
That's a great one. We are actually going, that will be on the June 2nd meeting.
Okay.
We will bring an item to amend the contract so the dollars would come back to us. We also propose, and we have to coordinate with Dr. Sewell timing, just some follow-up conversation with the Alliance.
Okay.
Across, as you know, the country, there's this infusion of dollars.
Right.
And so then, our community discussions about behavioral health and those investments, but then that component that they have, then what we're putting aside in ARPA funding, it's a large policy conversation, and General Manager Pierce has been doing some behind-the-scenes work and has started some of those conversations. So we will definitely bring back the administrative action, but Dr. Sewell and Joanne will help flesh out sort of those steps beyond.
Okay.
And as part of bringing those dollars back to the county, I know a question Commissioner Jacobs had in one of her emails that we'll answer in writing as well, but I'll go ahead and tell you here. She asked, what are we doing with that $5 million unspent? $2 million of it will offset the cost of Alliance this year. Rather than reduce their budget and create a stir and upsetting, we're basically going to offset our fund balance use. We've increased fund balance to offset some of that cost. So that's 2 of the 5. The 3, there's an additional $3 million for that y'all. There's lots of discussion we had for behavioral health, how to continue giving it to Alliance, doing other things, expanded things.
Right. It is
Once you
it is
adjust
a
the
big
ILA to get
conversation.
that money back.
Big
to us.
question.
It is.
Big
'Cause
question.
I'm sure we all could think of, programs and such
Right.
that we had
Right.
heard would be good for us to do, and so, and there's a whole capacity issue. We don't even necessarily know what the provider capacity is, but anyway, yeah, just wanted to raise it up.
Before we end, Deborah Craig Ray has been awfully quiet all day. Anything that you would like to say? No pressure, Deborah. You certainly don't want to put me on the microphone today. I thought I would just. Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just say that your General Assembly has started its work this week, and I am, of course, monitoring where things are. They are, of course, making adjustments to the budget. The big issue right now is the difference between the budget that was approved and the recommendations that the governor brought forth last week. And so my understanding is they are beginning to work behind the scenes, trying to see if they can match up some of those differences. And certainly one of the big issues they will be considering is increased salaries for the state employees and the teachers. So that certainly will have some impact in the work that we're doing right now. I think that's all I'll share this afternoon. Thank you.
Can I have one last review? So 3 different commissioners spoke about soil and water, specifically BETC, I think Betsy funding. Commissioner Burns, you spoke of wanting to hear about soil and water grants. Okay. And Commissioner Carter, you said you wanted to hear from soil and water as well. Is there anything specific that I can convey to Eddie?
Same thing, just, we've heard a lot during the year about
Since
the
that's
need.
where I started, we all want to hear about soil.
Soil and water,
That was my first.
community paramedicine out of the EMS emergency services, and CISS are the 3 additional ones. Are any
I think
other
it's
ones?
soil and water. It's hard to know for sure if it's soil and water or if it's half of a position in cooperative. I'm not sure, but basically, we've heard from the community request to fill the BETC position. It used to be Mike Dupree, and he was, I thought, in the cooperative extension. So I'm really not sure. Their areas of authority confuse me, but do they want the Betsy position or not? Just, you know, it's like this, the community has asked for it. I love it, but, you know, if Soil and Water doesn't,
They've been asking for a full-time person or?
asked for some position, but it didn't specify for BETC, so I don't know. And
Right.
We'll reconnoiter with Eddie and have him clarify some issues for you. Right now in the budget, the recommended budget, there is no additional positions recommended for soil and water. Just, that's where we're at
Yeah,
the
I
moment.
mean, I think one of the concerns is that the who is in charge of the program has changed, and how there are concerns about is it being functioning even at the capacity that it was formerly. So really understanding what is the level the program is functioning at now. This board has always strongly supported it, and because the community wants it to be expanded, but we need to first have an understanding of what is the current functioning level.
Okay, so if there's nothing else, we are adjourned.